Nashville studios, it's Stillman and Company. Delivered by TriStar Moving. TriStar Movers with 5-star service. With Jared Stillman on Nashville's best sports talk.
ESPN
1025 The Game and the Game Nashville app.
Stillman and Company is delivered by TriStar Moving, ESPN 1025 The Game. Happy Labor Day to everybody. Caroline Fenton is here. Hello, Caroline.
Hello. Happy Week 1 wrap-up day.
College football Week 1 is in the books. There has only been one time that I haven't done this show. It was last year. Didn't work on Labor Day last year. Every other Labor Day that I've been at the radio station, we've worked on Labor Day. And it's the same reason why I like working on Black Friday. Because
there's football.
There's a lot to get into. You know, July and June, and I don't like to complain about it because advertisers pay for July and June, and I love our advertisers, and I love our audience that's with us the whole time, even when we go 5 months with no sports because of the pandemic. Love those guys. But, you know, June and July is a lot. Then again, I tried to take vacation last week, and Floyd got named to the Titans, or last month, or 2 months ago, and Floyd got named to the Ring of Honor, and Pecorine retired. So maybe, you know, it's, but anywho, there is so much to get into. Max Hers is in for Ian, and I am glad that I am with you two guys today, Max and Caroline. You know why?
Why?
Ha-ha about LSU.
Okay.
And a ha-ha about Vanderbilt Max.
All right.
Now, my team may get their rear end spanked tonight. I would not be surprised if they do.
Easy there, Louisville Cardinal.
But I'm off tomorrow, so you do whatever you want. So,
4 hours of a Jared Stillman roast.
I want to start with this. Reactions to Week 1. What is your... Now, don't think about the individual game, but think about all of Week 1. Do you have one giant takeaway from Week 1 that doesn't involve saying, well, in this game I thought Georgia looked like a contender, and in that game I thought Alabama looked like it. Instead of that, is there one big, giant, overriding theme that you have that you're thinking about today? And you can say no.
I think the biggest thing, if I'm going to look at this Week 1 as a whole, it's that the teams that we expected to be good are really good, and the teams we expected to be bad are pretty bad. And of course, you have your outliers there. You know, I expected North Carolina to be great this season. We didn't see that against Virginia Tech. But I think overall, if I'm going to have one overarching theme, it's what we expected.
Now, I would caution you on that. Because do you remember last year, Texas A&M's first 2 weeks? Remember, it was a full SEC schedule last year.
Yes.
Who were they?
I mean, yes, it was a full SEC schedule last year, but I don't.
You don't remember Texas A&M's first 2 weeks?
I don't think so.
Max, do you remember Texas A&M's first 2 weeks last year?
Barely beat Vandy Week 1.
Barely beat Vandy Week 1, got sledgehammered by Alabama in Week 2. And everybody thought A&M was terrible. And that was the one that I kept telling people. Because I was on a bachelor party trip in Florida. Of course, we were watching Clemson, Georgia, made sure we went on a boat during the day, caught a bunch of fish, and then took it to some restaurant where they cooked the fish for us, and we watched Georgia, Florida. And by the way, let me say this.
That's fun.
I'm not a fish guy, but a little blackened mahi-mahi, not bad.
Does it for you?
Not bad. But, so, of course, we're watching all the games, and then we go back and we watch LSU, and it was funny because, you know, our buddy that's getting married was a quarterback in college at Memphis. And it was like, here's this bachelor party trip where everyone's trying to plan everything out. It was like, but we're going to be watching Georgia Clemson, right? Okay. And I kept telling them, be careful with Week 1. Like Max said, A&M last year barely beat Vandy Week 1 and got embarrassed by Alabama Week 2. And everybody thought they were awful. Everybody. And I'm not sure they lost another game the rest of the year. And that is why I'd say be careful with that. Here's my overriding theme. Take Nick Saban out of this. Mm-hmm. Who are the good coaches in college football?
Kirby Smart.
Okay.
Dabo.
He lost.
Mac Brown.
He
lost. I would say. Brian Kelly.
He barely won.
Yeah.
But think about this. Who's won national championships?
Ed Orgeron.
Lost.
Ryan Day.
Hasn't won a national title, but we'll see
has
with him.
Been to the national title.
Thought they were a little underwhelming.
Yes.
But the reason I bring this up is because in college football, the coaches are the stars. Everybody wants to make college football about the coaches. You know, in college basketball, it's the stars. It's Roy Williams. It's Coach K. It's John Calipari. In college football, it's the same way. I'd love to know. One of these days I'll do it, but I don't want to put myself through hell. One of these days I'll take a pad, and I'll watch an Alabama game, and I will dot down every time they show Nick Saban on the sidelines. What do you think? 500 times during a game?
Oh, at least.
So it's all about the coaches. It used to be about the programs. It used to be like the proud programs of this program versus that program. It's about the coaches. UCLA, LSU, for example, everybody's making that out about the coaches. Mm-hmm. Chip Kelly has built his program. Ed Orgeron, they are going down the drain. That's what people say. I'm not saying I believe it. I don't know. But I think it's funny. There's a story when Mal Moore, who was the then athletic director at Alabama, swung and missed on Rich Rodriguez, the coach at West Virginia, to be the next coach at Alabama. And the fans were mad. How can you miss on Rich Rod? So he gets on the jet, and he goes to Miami, and he offers Nick Saban $4 million a year to coach college football, which was unheard of at that time. Saban, who had publicly denied that he was going to take the Alabama job, gets on the plane with Mal Moore. So they're going back to Tuscaloosa, and Saban asks Mal Moore, Mal, do you think I'm the best football coach in the country? And as I read in Nick Saban's unauthorized biography, Saban turned over, Mal Moore turned over and thought, for $4 million, you better be the best coach in the country. And he said, of course I do. And Saban goes, well, I'm not anything without my players. But lucky for you, you recruited a hell of a recruiter. And I think about that when I watch these games. 2 years ago, we thought Ed Orgeron was a great coach. And now I watch LSU against UCLA in a program at UCLA that was just abysmal. And a guy who transformed Oregon into a national power coaching UCLA. And now all of a sudden I'm supposed to believe Chip Kelly, great coach, Ed Orgeron, bad coach. What? Dabo Swinney. Everybody loves Dabo. Everybody loves him.
Oh, I don't.
But did you see any adjustments that Clemson made against Georgia the other night? I didn't.
No.
Turns out it's a lot harder to beat these really good teams when you don't have Trevor Lawrence or Deshaun Watson. You know, it's harder for them to beat the good teams when they had Kelly Bryant as their starting quarterback. They still made the playoff, but they got housed when they got in. What about Clark Lee at Vanderbilt? Oh, man, people are mad at Clark Lee, aren't they? Oh, my goodness. This loss was so bad. This is the worst Vanderbilt team of all time. Clark Lee's loss was worse than Derek Mason's against Temple. Clark Lee's got no players. He's got no players at Vanderbilt. Is Clark Lee a good coach? I don't know. I think he is. He's certainly a better coach than losing by 20 points to ETSU. But that's what college football is. The actual coaching that goes on in college football really doesn't exist. People want to think in their heads that it does, but it really doesn't. Every now and then you get a guru coach who comes along that will beat you with worse players. But that doesn't happen very often. Jimbo Fisher won a national title. A&M has given Jimbo Fisher a fully guaranteed contract for infinity years and infinity dollars. I've never seen anything like it. Jimbo Fisher won a national title at Florida State when Jameis Winston was his quarterback. Remember Mark Helfrich, the guy who took over for Chip Kelly at Oregon? People forget, Mark Helfrich went to the college football playoff and 2 years later was fired because he had Marcus Mariota at quarterback, Heisman Trophy winner. I watched Bobby Petrino at Louisville demolish Florida State, a top 10 team. I think the score was like 56-6. And then I watched him go 3-9 2 years later because he didn't have Lamar Jackson. College football is all about the players. And I think that week one was a really good reminder of that. Who's got the best players? Oh, that'd be Nick Saban at Alabama. Dabo's a good recruiter. They have a good team. Kirby's a good recruiter too. They also have a good team. The difference between Dabo and Kirby? Dabo ended up with Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence, two generationally talented college quarterbacks. Kirby had his best quarterback, Justin Fields, sit the bench. Other than that, it's Jake Fromm, Jacob Eason, even JT Daniels, who everybody's been hyping up over the offseason. He's nothing different than what we've seen in Georgia in the last 5, 6, 7 years. Whether it was Hudson Mason or Jacob Eason, they're all the same. So when I look at week one, people are going to tell you things like, this coach, Dabo, has lost it without Trevor. He is that. No, he just lost 2 classes to the NFL that are unbelievable. When LSU hired Ed Orgeron, I couldn't believe that they hired Ed Orgeron. I thought that guy was a bum. I'm like, he didn't win at Ole Miss. He kind of won a little bit as an interim coach at USC. He kind of won as an interim coach at LSU. What's special about this guy? I mean, there's nothing. National championship. And then you look at that team and you're like, okay, first round pick at quarterback, first round pick at running back. What is it? 3 NFL linemen on the offensive line, 4 NFL linemen on the offensive line.
2 first-round wide receivers.
3 first-round wide receivers. Terrence Marshall.
Yes, 3 first-round wide receivers.
3 first-round wide receivers. Randy Moss's kid at tight end. And a great defense. No duh they won the national championship. Go back to those 2000 Miami teams. Go back to Gene Chizik winning a national title at Auburn with Cam Newton as his quarterback, getting embarrassed by Vanderbilt 2 years later and getting the axe. College football is all about the players. Football is all about the players. We used to have a segment we all remember, Ask the GM. Somebody once asked Floyd, would you rather have the best coaching staff or the best scouting staff? And he said, without a doubt, he'd rather have the best scouting staff. That's what Saturday was about. Last year was different because of COVID and how you could practice and couldn't practice and guys, working out here and working out there and this team can't play this week, so we got to play them 2 weeks. And it's all about the players. That's all college football's about. It's about the players. And I thought that this week showed us, okay, who's really a great coach? Who's really, truly, when you talk about a great coach, who's a great coach? Because if Ed Orgeron, no offense, but if Ed Orgeron was a great coach, he'd have found some players by now to get in there to replace the good ones they lost. Mm-hmm. It's not like Nick Saban hasn't had players go to the NFL. He's lost 2 first-round quarterbacks in back-to-back years, and the guy they have now might end up being better than both of them. That's a great coach. And I thought this weekend was an example of that. Again, I'm not going to get too worked up by week 1. I think everybody can watch week 1 and say, Alabama national championship, it's going to happen. This team better. We've said that about Alabama a lot in the past, and we've seen Alabama lose. So I'm not going to sit there today and say Alabama's going to win the national championship off of week 1. I'm not going to say Edo's going to get fired at LSU. I'm not going to say that DJ Uiagalelei can't play, though. He certainly's got some work to do. He'll get to crack that out against the ACC, though. I'm sure he'll be okay. Georgia to the playoff. Oh, Georgia, they could never. I'm not ruling out a loss to Kentucky. We've seen Georgia do some pretty crazy things. But I think that's the thing I take away from this weekend is in college football, we pay everybody like they're a great coach. We pay Kirby like he's a great coach. We pay Jimbo like he's a great coach. We pay Dabo like he's a great coach. We pay Edo like he's a great coach. We pay Chip Kelly like he's a great coach. There's one. There's one great coach. And it's because he constantly can keep it going over and over and over and over. When's the last time Nick Saban had a rebuilding year at Alabama? I'd argue it was 2010. And that was over a decade ago. That's my reaction to week 1. Your thoughts?
I think that it's so easy for college football to place so much emphasis on the coach because that is the only consistency that college football can have. You look at the NFL and it is so player-oriented, sure. Way more player-oriented than it is in college football because in college football you have turnover every 3 or 4 years.
Tom Brady has been a star in the NFL for 20 years.
Yeah.
Like you don't get that in college.
Like when you think Tampa Bay Buccaneers, you probably think Tom Brady.
Or
Gronk.
I would say this. The NFL is the one sport that literally teams matter, Players matter. Coaches matter. Every other sport, NBA players matter. Teams don't matter. The Chicago Bulls were the biggest TV draw for an entire decade. I can't even remember the last Chicago Bulls game I've watched. I don't even know who coaches the Bulls. I don't even know who's on the Bulls. So teams don't matter in the NBA. Baseball, the Los Angeles Angels have the best player in the history of the game probably since Babe Ruth, and nobody cares. So that's all team. You get the Yankees playing the Cubs in the World Series, everybody will watch. But if not, oh yeah, a ton. Yeah, I think that, again, this is the separator between Saban and everybody else, is everybody else can get a couple of big-time recruits, hit it out of the park, have things break their way, win a national title or two. Saban is there every year. Even if he doesn't win, he's there every year. And I think this year is no different. I will say this. I try to do this, and again, don't get too caught up in week one. Take that Alabama team that dominated Miami. Take them out. Slide them into that Georgia-Clemson game. They beat either team, I believe, and probably beat them handedly.
I would agree that they would beat either of those teams because based off of what I've seen from week one and based off of what we know about Alabama, I feel confident in saying that today Alabama is the best football program in college football right now.
And why is Alabama the best football program? Because he keeps getting the best players.
But I do think it's a little bit unfair to say that, he's the only one that can reload because their job is already cut out for them, which, is not to take away what Nick Saban has done, but they've already created something so special. There's already such a strong foundation in that program that recruiting for Alabama is just so easy. And that's not to take away from the fact that they get some of the best players in the country.
Who built it like that?
Nick Saban.
Okay.
And he should get credit for that. Absolutely.
You're an LSU fan.
Yeah.
Do you know what LSU was before he got there?
Who?
Saban.
Jerry DiNardo.
The Vanderbilt coach.
Yeah.
What happened, all these great players that are in Louisiana, every year how LSU has players that go to the NFL and their last names are,
Thibodeau.
Yes.
Yeah.
Those players were leaving Louisiana.
Yeah.
Saban came in and said, nope, we're building a wall. And all of a sudden, LSU has reaped the benefits of that ever since he left. Saban is the best coach, and everybody already knows that. But this weekend, I think, is the perfect example of how he's the best coach. How many titles Jimbo got? 1. How many titles Dabo got? 2.
2.
How many titles Ed Orgeron have?
1.
1. How many titles Chip Kelly have? None. How many Brian Kelly have? None. I mean, if you people don't understand the greatness of Nick Saban, this weekend should show you. 615-737-1025. It's all about the players in college football. 615-737-1025. We'll get your reaction in on week one. And let me just say this. We'll get into Vanderbilt, but I stand by what I said about Clark Lee. He might be a good coach. I don't know. But I don't think he's a bad coach based off of that horrific loss on Saturday. 615-737-1025. Coming up next here on just a perfect Labor Day. Coming up next, now that we've seen most of the week one games, how do we feel about the predictions? And are we going to flip-flop a little bit? I love this about week one. We'll get into that next. Stillman and Company. It's ESPN 1025, The Game, delivered by TriStar Moving. You can watch us on YouTube, Twitter, Periscope, and everywhere else. Just search Stillman and Company. We're right there. It's ESPN 1025, The Game.
aspects of officiating. Young back in the end zone again on 3rd and 5. That question might have to wait because there goes Jamison Williams to the house. Touchdown, Alabama.
Well, it was certainly great to play a game with fans, and I really like to thank the fans. You all make college football really special for the players. I was really proud of our players today in terms of the way they competed in the game today.
There you go, Nick Saban. All he wants to do is talk about, hey, I just want to thank the players because the players are so good. The players are. You talk to these old football guys, like the Sabans, the Belichicks, the Floyds, all they ever care about is players. All they ever care about. And I try to tell people this, like it's all sports. You all thought Peter Laviolette was the greatest coach when they went to the Stanley Cup final as an 8 seed. He won the division in 2019, and you all hated him. You think Peter got worse as a coach between 2017 and 2019? No. It's hard to win. And there are a few people who can do it just consistently between, college football, the NFL. I mean, look, I was at Tampa Bay Bucks practice 3 weeks ago. Tom Brady's press conference. Remember I asked him about the MFer? Mm-hmm. And Brady was furious with how they practiced that day. Do you know how hard that is for a Super Bowl winning quarterback to get up there and criticize his team that just won the Super Bowl? That's hard. Dak Prescott's not going to do that. Mm-hmm. But that's why Tom Brady can win year after year, and there's no Super Bowl hangover on a year-in, year-out basis with the Patriots because Brady and Belichick don't believe in that. Saban doesn't believe in that. Michael Jordan never believed in that. Kobe didn't believe in that. And that's why those are the only guys like that exist. And outside of that, it's, oh, yeah, remember the year Joe Burrow had at LSU? And oh, my goodness. And it's not going to happen the next year, and it's not going to happen this year.
But it happened once.
And
we have that to hold on to.
You know what's funny about LSU? And I'll get to the phones in just a second. This is what I really think is going to happen. I do think Ed Orgeron's going to get fired. And here's why I think it. Not because they're going to look at a bad year this year after a bad year last year and say, that's 2 bad years in a row, Ed, you're a bum, get out of here. But there's one way to keep a college coach from going to the NFL or to get an NFL coach out of college, and that is to make him the head coach. See, you guys probably don't remember this, but when Mike Vrabel was hired as Titans head coach, you know who he wanted for offensive coordinator?
Who?
Ryan Day.
Interesting.
He wanted the quarterback coach at Ohio State, Ryan Day, who I had never heard of. He wanted Ryan Day to be the head coach or be the offensive coordinator.
Would have been a great offensive coordinator.
And all of a sudden, he gets promoted to co-offensive coordinator at Ohio State. And I bet there was some, hey, by the way, when Urban
just
leaves,
stay with us.
You're the guy.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll take the job. Not go coordinate in the NFL. Joe Brady is the offensive coordinator of the Carolina Panthers. Mm-hmm. And Joe Brady has gotten a couple of interviews for head coaching jobs in the NFL. And, he's really, what are you going to do with Sam Darnold at cornerback in Carolina? Maybe you do something good. I don't know. But I could see LSU this year thinking, hey, if he gets a quarterback in the first round of the draft, we know what Joe Brady can do. And if Joe Brady goes out there and Joe Brady gets a quarterback and he's an NFL coach, we'll never be able to get him again. And because Edo will have lost 2 years in a row, if that's what happens to LSU this year, then they'll consider the fact that they'll say, well, that was a fluke year, and that was Dave Aranda and Joe Brady and Joe Burrow, and can't bring Joe Burrow back. But you can bring Joe Brady back. And they'll sell that to some booster who's got billions of dollars who will write, a $20 million check over here and a $20 million check over there, and Joe Brady will be the next coach at LSU.
You think?
That's what I think.
That's interesting because I think about it a couple ways. The tolerance at LSU is very, very low for coaches, but I think you also have to look at it like, okay, you're going to fire him 2 years removed from one of the absolute best college football seasons of all time. But I do think that Ed Orgeron has something that not a lot of coaches can do, and it's the ability to just be hands-off. He is great at the front of a program. He is a great recruiter. He's a hell of a recruiter, and he's really good at telling his coordinators, do your thing. Do your thing, and I'll just be the one in charge. I'll be the leader.
But does anybody care about that in college football, really?
But that's the problem right now with LSU is that they don't have good coordinators at this point. They have 2 first-year coordinators.
Remember what Auburn did. Gene Chizik won a national title. 2 years they were terrible. Got rid of him. Got Gus Malzahn, the coordinator of the championship team. That's my prediction for LSU.
No, Joe Brady was not the coordinator, but
he was.
Yes, essentially, yes.
But he was. Steve,
yeah.
Esminger?
Steve Ensminger.
Yeah, he was the okay. Yeah, that's like Vrabel go, I don't know why you guys get all caught up in titles. That's why, Mike. Let's go to your phone. 615-737-1025. Phone line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Meanwhile, Caroline will get ready to tell us about BetUS in just a little bit. Garrett is going to kick us off today. Sorry about that. On a Reaction Monday on Clemson. Thank you for calling. Go ahead, Garrett.
Yeah, I just wanted to say earlier you had asked the question, what did Week 1 do to what is the Week 1 overall takeaway?
Sure.
I would say the Week 1 takeaway is that with these ACC teams losing and Clemson losing, it kind of makes the college playoff more wide open for these non-Power 5 teams. And I think that really makes it interesting and an interesting playoff. And I'll hang up and listen and go Tigers.
Thank you, Garrett. What do you make of this? Because I will say this. I did think last night, I go, if Florida State knocks off Notre Dame, then you can really make the argument that Notre Dame is now out of the playoff picture. Mm-hmm. Any loss to Notre Dame takes them out of the playoff picture, unless it is to, and I don't even know who the great teams on their schedule are this year. Sometimes they luck into playing like two great teams. Sometimes they really truly luck into not playing any good teams. But if Notre Dame loses a game as an independent, they're not going to make the playoffs. So I thought about this. If Florida State beats Notre Dame, they're out. Mm-hmm. And the SEC, the second place team, if Alabama is the first place team, the second place team will have an advantage on Clemson. Because whoever the second place team is, let's say it's a one-loss A&M like last year. They lose to Alabama. They don't lose another game the rest of the year. That team should have a step on Clemson because if Georgia's not the second best team in the SEC, A&M is, then I think you have a solid argument to put A&M in over Clemson. Mm-hmm. And I really thought that yesterday, if you were an SEC fan, you should have been rooting for Florida State. Not that I think that Notre Dame's going to make the playoff, and it's early, and let's not get caught up with Week 1, as far as this team, that team, where they go, how they, any of that. But I did think about that as far as getting a second SEC team in. He was talking about these smaller schools, the group of 5 schools getting in. I'm not sure if until we go to 12, we'll ever see a group of 5 team get in there. I think there is a solid path now for a second SEC team to get in.
I absolutely do think that there is a path for a second SEC team that is completely not out of the picture, especially Georgia beating Clemson. That is a big-time name. That is a big-time win. And to your point about Group of 5 schools getting into the college football playoff, I don't think they will get in, but I do think they will give teams that are kind of projected to go to the college football playoff, or at least in the playoff conversation, they'll give them some trouble. For example, Cincinnati plays Notre Dame. If Cincinnati beats Notre Dame, I don't think that puts Cincinnati in the college football playoff, but that knocks Notre Dame out of it.
Sure. I would not. I still think that they're going to put another Power 5 team in.
100%.
Before they're going to put the group of 5
They're going to put a
in.
conference champion in over a Cincinnati or Coastal Carolina.
And the money man in all of this is Bill Hancock. And see, this is why Bill Hancock and I have a love-hate relationship. Like, I love Bill Hancock, but also, I think Bill Hancock goes on all these shows at media days and stuff. And just, what's so great about the playoff is, and this was the same guy that was trying to sell us on just 2 teams, a decade ago. Mm-hmm. And now he's trying to tell us that we need 12 teams. And so he's an ultimate politician. So politicians like to go on shows and be interviewed by people they're going to be friendly interviews. We see that of all the people on the right go on Fox and all the people on the left don't go on Fox. That kind of thing.
Right.
They like friendly interviews. And, it's never a friendly interview with Bill because I'm sitting here saying like this, and I know that really it's the Power 5 schools that matter, which is why the Big Ten, ACC, and Pac-12 got together because they know that they're 3 of the 4 that matter. So their majority vote counts the most, and they basically got together not to let Greg Sankey run this thing into 12. So it's a whole SEC. But I do think Bill Hancock, the guy who controls the money with all of this, wants 12 teams so bad, he's going to make the smaller schools pay to try to get on the side of the SEC and beg for that 12-team expansion. But that's just some conspiracy theory level, whatever that I have.
And that kind of sucks.
But
I don't know if it would necessarily happen.
Do you follow it or no?
I don't really know if I do.
See, I know Bill. I know Bill's the one guy in college sports who's all about the money.
I think there are a lot of people in college sports now that are all about
But
the money.
he's all about the money.
Yeah.
There's no way to convince him otherwise.
And it's a business. Yes, of course you're going to be about the money, but it feels like so many decisions in college football recently have been fueled by money and pretty much nothing else.
And that's what makes it not feel as college football-ish anymore.
Right.
And I know that that's rude, but I'm just saying. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. How have our predictions changed? Caroline and I will discuss that coming up next. But first, Caroline wants to tell all of you about BetUS.
Yes, BetUS is my favorite sports book. Football is back. My lock of the day on Saturday. Georgia on the money line against Clemson. So I made a little bit of money on Saturday. You can make some money too. It's time for you to get in on the action at BetUS. They've been America's favorite sports book for over 25 years. And that is exactly why I endorse BetUS. It's a very long time. So with BetUS, you know that you're getting integrity and longevity. They wouldn't be around this long if you didn't know you were going to get paid. So BetUS has all kinds of live bets. MMA, golf, horses, esports, college football, you name it. They've got it. Call BetUS today. They'll walk you through setting up an account. It's super easy. Call 1-800-79-BET-US. That is 1-800-79-BET-US. Nobody in the industry gives bigger bonuses than BetUS, and I can guarantee you that. Join now. Mention GAME, G-A-M-E, and you can get up to 200% in bonuses on your first deposit. Nobody in the industry beats that. I bet at BetUS, and so should you. So go now to BetUS.com. Join today. Put in promo code GAME, G-A-M-E. You'll get up to 200% in bonuses on your first deposit. That is BetUS.com.
Right clock at 2. From the pocket. Intercepted! Jumping the route is Christopher Smith. A foot race. Can the quarterback catch him? He cannot pick 6 Georgia.
We controlled our own destiny, and we still control our own destiny. And the important thing is that we have to get better. What I did find out is we've got a lot of resiliency, and when our offense had to convert, when our offense had to force the ball down somebody's throat, a pretty good defense, they were able to do it.
That was Kirby Smart. How about them Bulldogs? By the way, Silly Underdog Picks is back. Sign up and play today. Plus, you can get your friends or family to play as a group. Pick 3 football underdog teams you think will win each week for a chance to win weekly prizes like a pair of tickets to a sporting event or concert in Nashville. Go to thegamenashville.com. Volunteer Hose and Gasket. Presented by the presenting sponsor of Silly Underdog Picks. Sorry, I didn't read the script perfectly there. First of all, what do we think about Georgia? Did we look at the game Saturday as Georgia good, Clemson bad, or do we look at it as, hey, Alabama's got some serious competition there in the SEC, or how did we look at that with Kirby pulling what we both thought was going to be the upset with Georgia?
See, I looked at it as 2 good teams, 2 really good defenses, 2 quarterbacks that are probably at the top of college football. I'm not going to say the best. I'm not going to give out a Heisman now.
I think JT Daniels.
JT Daniels is good. He's fine.
I may eat my words on this. I thought he missed some throws. Like, I thought JT Daniels, the way everybody was hyping him up, like, I thought he was better than the recent Georgia quarterbacks, and he's not. In the last, I'm trying to think of, like, all the Georgia quarterbacks over the last 15 years. But I think it's like Stafford, Aaron Murray, Hudson Mason, Jacob Eason, Jake Fromm, Justin Fields, but he didn't really, I think the fact that they didn't have Justin Fields in reality is probably what's hurt them most. And now this guy, JT Daniels, and I feel like there's some other guy in there that I'm forgetting. But it's some guy that was like a 1-year bridge, not any good, like Stetson Bennett or something. So when you think of that, Stafford's the one guy that stands out. Now, they won a Sugar Bowl with Stafford, but Stafford's the one guy that stands out. Murray is clearly the second best quarterback in that group. And I thought that Daniels, the way people were hyping him up, I was thinking that JT Daniels was going to be like Aaron Murray good, and he was not Aaron Murray good. There to me, when you're talking Georgia quarterbacks, there's Stafford, Aaron Murray, David Green, of this century. And then there's everybody else. And I think Daniels is more of an everybody else. I was disappointed with JT Daniels.
But I still think that Georgia was a better team. And that was my takeaway, was 2 good teams. Georgia's just better. And Georgia's defense is just absolutely ridiculous.
And then the other thing is this Clemson quarterback, DJ
Uiagalelei, or as you call him, the guy from the Dr. Pepper commercials.
DJ can't play. No, I'm kidding. He's got to be better. Like, if you're going to be the quarterback at Clemson, you got to be better in a game like that.
But, I mean, you put him into Kentucky, and we're probably singing his praises. But it's the fact that he's coming into Clemson and he's following Trevor Lawrence, and there's such a high expectation. Because I think he was fine.
He started 2 games on national TV. Like, this is Clemson we're talking
2
about.
losses.
Here. This is Clemson. This is not San Diego State.
The expectation is different.
Right. The expectation with these – when Bryce Young gets the starting job at Alabama and Nick Saban goes up at SEC Media Days and says that he's already got $1 million deal in name, image, and likeness, they're not giving that to him to go 8-4. That is because he's the starting quarterback at Alabama, and they expect a national championship. Because the last 3 guys that have started at Alabama have all won national championships. They're all starting quarterbacks in the NFL right now. So Bryce Young walks in there with the expectation that you're going to go kill Miami, and he did. Uiagalelei.
There you go.
It took me a little bit with Tua. It's going to take me a little bit with
Uiagalelei,
which he may not even still be starting by the time that I finally learn.
Oh, that's dramatic.
Kelly Bryant. But my point here with this is he started 2 games on national TV, and he's lost them both. And I would say neither team. That Georgia defense is good, but I don't think Georgia is a great team this year. Now, again, I don't get too caught up in week 1. I'd say, easy on getting caught. Georgia could easily lose 2 SEC games this year.
2?
Sure.
Who are they losing to?
They could lose a game to Florida. They could lose a game to Kentucky. They could lose a game in the SEC championship game.
They will, if it is Alabama and Georgia, which I feel comfortable saying right now, it probably will be, they will lose that game.
And, I mean, I don't know about you guys. The most impressive thing to me in the SEC is that Kentucky's learned how to pass.
Yes.
Like, so before we sit here, and this is, again, I tell you, don't get too caught up in week one. But now we've seen Uwe Ungalale
there it is.
Play 2 nationally televised primetime games, and he has lost both of them. And need I remind you, the difference between Clemson with Uwe Ungalale and then against Notre Dame last year, and then Trevor Lawrence at quarterback when they played Notre Dame later in the year. And the swing was about 35 points. So he's had a whole year to prepare to be the starter, to sign Dr. Pepper contracts, to get out there and go be Clemson's quarterback. And I thought anything above 3rd and 4 he couldn't get you out of.
But I also don't think it's fair because last week we were hammering that Georgia was going to beat Clemson, and now they do. And then you're saying that I don't think so. I'm not there yet. If I see DJ Uiagalelei lose games to Virginia Tech and UNC and they're dropping regular season ACC games, then I'll say, yeah, this is not the Clemson standard. But I think them losing to Georgia, which, yes, Clemson was favored, but I think we both expected Georgia to win. I think a lot of people expected Georgia to win.
Clemson wins out and gets housed in the first round of the playoff.
I could see that.
Then are you still on this kid's bandwagon?
I'm not on his bandwagon.
Because
I'm just saying that I don't think he's not going to start later in the season. I'm not going to say he's going to be a Heisman finalist.
Like when you get that job, like there's a couple of jobs out there. When you get it, the expectation of what you are is not a fair expectation.
Correct.
Bryce Young, that way. John Shire is going to replace Mike Krzyzewski as the head basketball coach at Duke. The expectations for John Shire are going to be astronomical. They're not going to be the same as when Woj, the assistant coach, left and went to Marquette. You know, it's just not the same. When When Johnny Dawkins left Coach K's staff and went to Stanford and is now at UCF, the expectations were not the same for him as they would be if he were the guy that replaced Coach K. So when John Shire replaces Coach K, the expectations are going to be huge. Just like the expectations for Hubert Davis are going to be huge replacing Roy Williams. Or Chris Mack at Louisville has already angered some of the fans because apparently we're shocked that he's not as good of a coach as Rick Pitino. So there are certain jobs that when you get these jobs, the expectation level is really high and it's not fair. Bryce Young's in that same boat.
But he met expectations, if not exceeded them.
But what happens for a guy like Uwe Ungalale is that...
Not quite.
We
get the point.
We'll work on it. The thing for DJ at Clemson is that everybody's expecting you to be Trevor Lawrence. Everybody's expecting you to be Deshaun Watson. They're not expecting you to be Kelly Bryant. But like most things in life would tell you that there's probably a better chance that he's Kelly Bryant than that he's Trevor Lawrence or Deshaun Watson.
Yes, because, to your point, it's not like Clemson has this storied history of quarterbacks. And like Alabama, there's a new quarterback that just steps in and is going to be a Heisman finalist, is going to be a college football national champion. Just because DJ Uiagalelei is going to be third in line behind Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence doesn't mean that he's going to be them. It's not like it's been 2 quarterbacks back-to-back that were incredibly talented and brought a ton of success to the Clemson football program. But this isn't some sort of... would you call what Clemson has a dynasty? Because I won't.
No,
Alabama, that's a dynasty.
I heard Colin Cowherd today say, Mac Brown in Texas was a dynasty. They won one national
championship.
And he did it because he had Vince Young. Like, that's Vince Young. There are stories out there about, what Vince Young knew or didn't know. And like Kevin Mawai, I didn't see this. I heard this and I know Kevin, so I should ask, but I didn't. But I think somebody was telling me, I was on this bachelor party trip this weekend and they were talking about, Kevin Mawai said that Vince Young needed like color coordination as far as certain plays or whatever in the NFL. And I said, imagine the talent you have to go 32-19 as a starter, go to 2 Pro Bowls and win the Rookie of the Year. The NFL's hard.
Yeah.
So think about how good you have to be to win all those games if you can't do simple things like that. And it's the same with Cam Newton. Like the report, Rob Ninkovich came out last week and said he had heard from his sources inside the building, and I think Nico's got pretty good sources.
Yeah, seeing as though he was there.
And he said that Mac Jones had to teach Cam Newton the plays. Even though Cam was there last year, Cam couldn't understand it. Mac had to teach Cam. That guy was a league MVP.
Oh.
So think about how much talent you have to have. That's why the standards are so high. But yeah, when they said Mac Brown dynasty, I was like, what?
No.
Now, I'd say Clemson is pretty close to a dynasty. And the only reason they don't have a dynasty is because of Alabama.
Yes.
It's like, would you call the Detroit Pistons of the 90s that won 2 titles a dynasty?
No. I think
No.
to be called a dynasty, you have to win 3 in 5 years.
But like, if Michael Jordan doesn't show up,
They
then
would
the
have
Pistons
more.
probably do win a third one.
But we can play that game all day.
Sure. No, for sure.
Because if you want to be called a dynasty, then you're going to have to beat the other best teams in the country. Alabama's done that. Clemson hasn't been able to beat Alabama enough to be able to be called a dynasty. So I think the expectations for DJ Uiagalelei are so incredibly high, but it's not necessarily fair.
That Dr. Pepper contract ain't free.
True.
That's why you know what? To me, you start making money, you can get criticized.
But I also think this just kind of proves that the SEC is so much better of a conference than the ACC.
I'd hold off on that.
Because Georgia, let's call them the second best team
So
in
is
the
the
SEC
Pac-12
right now.
is the Pac-12 better than the SEC because UCLA beat LSU?
No.
But so then how did this game prove that?
Because the absolute best team in the ACC and Clemson.
The team you think is the best team.
Right now, from what we know. What would you call the best team?
Well, but that's why I say you can't get too caught up in week 1.
Yes.
Because
but let's call them the best
because,
team
for
in
example,
ACC. If you had to
2
pick
years
one
ago,
right now, who would
2
you
years
pick?
ago, nobody would have said after week 1 that LSU was the best team in the SEC.
No.
So that's why I don't
Because
get too
that
caught
was
in
an
week 1.
exception. If we're over here talking about Clemson possibly being a dynasty, then I feel okay calling them the best team in the ACC.
Who's to say Florida State's not?
From what I know right now, I'm calling it Clemson.
So I'm not there yet. I understand where you're going with that, and a lot of people are going to go there and say, see, SEC's better, but that's a week 1 thing. That's a week 1 thing. That's a they, them, this, that, they, and then immediately you just say, well, but the SEC lost to ETSU. The SEC lost to UCLA. The SEC, you can do that over and over again. Let's get to your text next because I see them blowing up. 615-737-1025. Stillman and Company. It's ESPN 1025 again. So I'm going to give Max a vote here. Max is in for Ian today. Caroline's mad at me about Clemson. I can tell. I can sense.
Because you're telling me,
She's
whoa,
not
whoa, whoa,
in the Labor
pump the
Day
brakes on
spirit.
week one.
You can't get too caught up in week one.
And then you're here saying, oh, well, DJ Uiagalelei, I'm not even going to learn his name because they'll have a new quarterback soon enough. Can we put stock into week one or not?
And as I said to you,
what?
My response was about DJ Uiagalelei.
DJ Uiagalelei. So that he lost to Notre Dame last year.
Okay, so now
And
I'm not
won.
going off of week one. I'm going off of 2 games. 2 major games he's played in.
What about the other? Was it 3 games total that he stepped in for Trevor Lawrence?
I don't know, but I don't care what you do against Boston College. Like that.
But that's what gets Clemson in the in the college football playoff every year is beating Boston College and Duke and Virginia.
South Carolina.
And South Carolina.
Yes.
That's what gets them in.
Right.
Because they don't play the level of Georgia and Notre Dame every week.
Right. And Kelly Bryant did all that.
Yeah. Okay, good for Kelly Bryant.
And then they found a new quarterback, and they put in the new quarterback, and everybody thought, they're taking. Remember, Kelly Bryant lost the starting job on like a Tuesday and transferred on a Wednesday, and Trevor Lawrence got concussed, and Chase Bryce had to come in the game and save them from a loss against North Carolina because Kelly Bryant basically quit on the team, and everybody was like, and I think Dabo kind of threw Kelly Bryant under the bus, for quitting on the team because he lost his job, and there was like all this should he have lost his job because he didn't lose any games, and they're putting this kid in there. There's a reason they put Trevor Lawrence in for Kelly Bryant. Uiagalelei's got to show me a little bit more. Let's go to your text. 615-737-1025. Text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com.
One texter texts in and says, did you watch JT tape when he was at USC? Yikes.
No, I did not.
And also after one game, you're going to quit on DJ. Yikes, Jared.
2.
I agree.
2.
I concur to the texter.
2. But we don't get to pretend that he didn't lose last year.
We're just going to look past the game that he did win. You're only going to pick the ones that prove your point, right?
No. We're going to look past those games because those games don't matter.
Why not?
Because those games aren't again. When you talk about the national championship,
if they lose those games, they matter. When they win, it doesn't matter.
Yes. What is the standard at Clemson? So they gave
going to the college football playoff.
They gave Alabama a trophy for winning on Saturday. When you win the Chick-fil-A kickoff classic, they give you, and it's that stupid leather helmet, and then everybody screws around. Where do you think Alabama puts those?
They don't have any room. Honestly, they probably just give them away.
Because they don't matter.
Those are the toys that they put in McDonald's bags for kids' meals in Tuscaloosa.
Because those games don't matter.
When you're at Alabama and you get trophies like that every year. Clemson's been doing that for how long? 5 years?
Let's see. Deshaun
4
Watson
years?
got there when I was on the radio in
2016?
Louisville. No, Deshaun Watson got there when I was in Louisville, which was 2014.
Well, they won the national championship in 16.
Well, yeah, but we don't just look at a program based on its national championships. That's what old people do. Because that's how they'll sit there and say, I think Tennessee is a better football program than Oregon because we've won 15 national championships. And that's not what I'm talking about. So in terms of being like a relevant contender in college football, like the top of the top where you care about the national championship and nothing else. In my opinion, there are 5 schools that can operate that way right now. 6 because Notre Dame's not in a conference. So there are 6 schools that can operate that way right now.
Okay.
Notre Dame, Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, Ohio State, and LSU. And those are the 6 that can literally care only about winning a title. And it burns the rear end of the Georgia Bulldogs that they have not won a national title since 1980. They are the same people that when they win the East, they don't care. Now, if they win the SEC, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
Well, like beating Boston College or whoever Uiagalelei beat last year when he was the quarterback, that doesn't matter to Clemson. That's beating like Duke or Louisville. The bad schools, it doesn't matter to them. Just like winning the kickoff classic doesn't matter to Alabama. Winning the Sugar Bowl matters to Alabama because it's a big deal. And so that's my take on that one. What's another text say?
One texter texts in and says, DJ passed for over 400 yards and 3 or 4 touchdowns against Notre Dame, so I really don't think that's his loss as much as it was Clemson's defense last year. So
which quarterback is more likely to make the Hall of Fame, Eli Manning or Phillip Rivers?
Eli Manning.
Why is Eli Manning more likely to make the Hall of Fame than Phillip Rivers?
Because he has more Super Bowls than Phillip Rivers, and he played for the New York Giants.
Bingo! Bingo! Wins is a quarterback stat.
which Eli Manning has a 500 winning stat.
Wins is a quarterback stat. He won the big ones. Might have taken a fluke catch by David Tyree and a fluke throw and fluke catch by Mario Manningham that robbed Floyd of a Super Bowl and a drop by Wes Welker, but he won them. Wins is a quarterback stat. There is no other, when you go to Football Reference, there is no other position that has a win-loss total on it other than quarterback. Wins is a quarterback stat. So you can tell me that Uwe Ungalale threw for 9,000 yards. By the way, the defensive coordinator, and I like Clark Lee, and I think he's a good coach, and I don't judge him for the Vanderbilt thing, though we'll get to Vanderbilt in just a second. The defensive coordinator that Uwe Ungalale threw for 400 yards on just lost to ETSU by 20. So you guys tell me what you want to tell me. That's fine. But knock yourself out. One more.
Ben texts in and says, I wish college football was about football and not just a recruiting battle. Vanderbilt and the Vols will never win a national title in the future.
It's pretty amazing that when you really think about it, coaching is a bigger element in college basketball than it is in college football.
Coaching is a bigger element?
Sure.
Why do you think that?
You think Gonzaga and Baylor have the best recruiting classes in college basketball every year?
I don't know, honestly.
John Calipari gets the best recruits almost every year.
So does Rick Barnes.
John Calipari has one national title. And it was because he got Anthony Davis. And your point about Rick Barnes. I think you can make the argument coaching matters more in college basketball because there's fewer players and it's more micromanaged of a game than it does in college football. Though I know that would have never flown with Floyd. That argument would have. I can just hear him just cackling right now when I say that. Speaking of Floyd cackling, a Vanderbilt 20-point loss to ETSU would have done it. I mean, it would have got him going. He one time thought that they should kick Vandy out of the SEC. He said, if I was commissioner, I'd kick Vandy out of the SEC.
You can't do that.
You can't do that. I try to explain that to everybody, and nobody listens. But coming up next, we knew Vandy was going to be bad. Did we think they were going to be this bad? And what do we make of it next? Stillman and Company. It's ESPN 102.5 The Game.
Nashville studios, it's Stillman and Company. Delivered by TriStar Moving. TriStar Movers with 5-star service. With Jared Stillman on Nashville's best sports talk.
ESPN.
1025 The Game and the Game Nashville app.
Stillman and Company is delivered by TriStar Moving, ESPN 1025 The Game. Caroline Fenton here. Max is in for Ian today. And Max, we got to talk about your Vanderbilt Commodores. That's my cue for you to acknowledge the 20-point loss.
I don't think he wants to.
I acknowledge the 20-point loss.
Okay. Now let me say this, and I got a lot to say about Vanderbilt. I grew up a Vanderbilt fan. Now, I've always told people what that meant was we'd watch UT on every Saturday and we'd root against UT. So that was what being a Vanderbilt fan growing up was to me.
That's kind of sad.
I know, but you know how people bond with you always hear the story of my granddaddy and I used to watch the Auburn game every week, and if Auburn was playing at 2:30 in the morning, we'd watch the Auburn game. That kind of.
Yeah.
That's kind of how we were. And on Saturday, we watch UT. And we root for Florida, or we root for LSU, or we'd root for Arkansas, or we'd root.
The enemy of my enemy is my friend.
There you go. So, because Vanderbilt wasn't very good. I've seen Vanderbilt in my lifetime lose a lot of games. I used to joke with Jordan Rodgers before he was famous that anytime he went into a job interview, all he has to do is say, I won 9 games as a quarterback at Vanderbilt, and then kick his feet up on the desk and say, give me the job. Do people not understand how hard that is to do? Win 9 games at Vanderbilt? So, anywho, Vanderbilt loses by 20 to ETSU. And there are so many things that I saw written over the last couple of days that just put into perspective how bad of a loss that truly is. I told you, Caroline, that 2 years ago I bought the 3-pack of tickets to support Derek Mason because I told Coach Mason. He came on the show 3 or 4 times just begging for people to buy tickets to the Georgia game and support Vandy, and I knew it was going to be a Georgia home game, which it was, but I bought tickets because I felt like if you'd be kind enough to really, if you're going to have the humility to beg people to come to your stadium, then I'm going to buy the tickets. So I had to buy a 3-pack. Basically, you get one good game, Georgia or LSU. Mm-hmm. You got one medium game, and you got one bum game. So the medium game I got was Kentucky, and I gave those tickets away. And the bum game I got was ETSU, and I didn't even ask anybody if they wanted to go. I just didn't use the tickets. I didn't even think about it. That was a 30-0 Vanderbilt win. That was 2 years ago. So in the span of 2 years, the net result of Vanderbilt is minus 50 points to ETSU.
Woof.
Now, I'm sure ETSU's gotten a little bit better, and we all know Vanderbilt has gotten a lot worse. And so here's what I'm going to say. That was a humiliating defeat for Vanderbilt. I've seen Vanderbilt lose a lot of games. I'm not sure we will ever forget this one. And that's saying something because, like I said, I grew up a Vanderbilt fan. I have seen them lose a lot of games. I remember paying for the pay-per-view package, using allowance money to pay for the college goal line package on ESPN. It was like the Sunday ticket before ESPN just got 5 billion channels and every game was on TV. And I had to pay monthly or whatever for the goal line package. And I got it. And I watched Jay Cutler as a true freshman lose to Georgia Tech. I saw it all. I have seen Vanderbilt lose some just remarkably wild games. And this might be the worst one ever. And so I think there's 2 ways to go about this. You look at the coaches, right? You look at Clark Lee, and this is his first game, and you think, oh, wow. Oh, wow. Could this have been a mistake to hire Clark Lee as the coach? And I don't think that's the case. So then the natural thing to do when you are a coach defender, the natural thing to do would be to blame the old coach and look at Derek Mason and say, Derek Mason left it so bad for Clark Lee that it's all Derek Mason's fault. And I don't believe that either. Derek Mason went to bowl games as Vanderbilt's coach. He beat Tennessee 3 years in a row. I've been watching Vandy my whole life, and no one beat Tennessee 3 years in a row. The first time Vanderbilt made a bowl game, I was 19 years old. So, this is different. I remember when Woody Woodenhofer lost to MTSU in a season opener, and that was embarrassing. I remember when Jay Cutler and Bobby Johnson lost to MTSU, and it kept them out of a bowl game. This is the one that we may not forget. But I don't think this is about Clark Lee. And I don't think this is about Derek Mason. I have no idea how good of a coach Clark Lee is going to be. I'll say this. I got to know Clark a little bit during the celebrity softball game. I think he's a great guy. I think he's a smart guy. I think he cares a lot. I think he knows football. And I will continue to say that because I believe it. And this is going to be a bad year. If Saturday was any indication of it, this is going to be a horrible year for Clark Lee. David Culley, a Vanderbilt alum who's the head coach of the Houston Texans, might have a better time this year than Clark Lee. That's how bad it is. But I also am not going to place the blame on Derek Mason. I tried to defend Mason last year when they lost every game. When I heard that the SEC was going to play football, but it was going to be 10 games against SEC teams, I said on the radio, 0-10 for Vandy. And people got mad. Oh, my goodness, did they get mad? They got mad. Like, how dare you say 0-10? And I'm like, it's going to be 0-10. Like
it was 0-10.
It's going to be 0-10. And luckily for them, one of those games was canceled, so it was 0-9.
Okay.
But Derek Mason got fired. And I just thought that was ridiculous. And I'd been one that early on thought they should fire Mason, because James Franklin was so good. And so I'm like, Mason, he's got to go. But I've always thought that last year was a Vanderbilt problem and not a Mason problem. Nobody wanted to talk about this because one of the biggest aspects of Vanderbilt's lack of success is that just not enough people in Nashville care. And they really don't. But nobody wanted to say this about Derek Mason. His entire offensive line opted out because of COVID. He had defensive players opt out. He lost his star defensive tackle to a torn Achilles last year. He had a freshman quarterback. When you have the most liberal university in the SEC, and I think we can all agree that Vanderbilt is, you're going to have the most COVID opt-outs. When you have the fewest guys likely to make it to the NFL, so guys that aren't out there trying to put tape together for teams, you're going to finish last in the SEC. And that happened to Mason. And they fired him anyways. And I just thought that was unfair. I didn't think that Bill Belichick could have won with that team last year. Nick Saban couldn't have won with that team last year. And so they're still picking up from that. And Mason by no means, and I like Derek Mason a lot. Mason by no means was a great coach. I even told him that to his face. I said to him during the COVID shutdowns, I was walking around my neighborhood. I didn't even know we lived in the same neighborhood. And we bumped into each other. And we spent like 2 hours in his driveway on a Saturday in April of 2020 just talking about football. And I said to him, I hope they never fire you. I think you are the perfect coach for Vanderbilt. And this show, when it was Jared and the GM, was a very pro-Derek Mason show because I felt like Derek Mason, and Clark Lee has a lot of these things too, but Derek Mason had the humility to get kicked in the teeth every single week and have a big smile while he was doing it and continue to kind of push his message and try to get those kids into better situations and put kids into the NFL and got kids graduated and all of those things. Didn't cheat in recruiting, didn't try to cheat in recruiting. Every game he had just the most positive outlook. And I thought Vanderbilt was never going to do anything that would demand anything more than that. So Clark Lee comes in. And I'll say this about being the coach at Vanderbilt. It'll take you one of two ways. Either you are so competitive that you're going to win, or else you're going to have to go because you're not going to be able to take it, or you step back and say, hey, these are the cards I'm dealt, but I'm making $3 million a year and I get to live in Nashville, Tennessee. And I think Derek Mason approached his life that way, which was, look, man, they just added LSU, the defending national champion, to my schedule. What am I supposed to do? Whereas Clark Lee right now, Clark is one of these, like, Clark is so motivated to turn this thing around. Like, it is in his heart to turn Vandy around. And he's got a plan. And I think he's a smart guy, and he's going to try to execute the plan. But I still keep thinking about Vandy. I keep thinking Vandy is the roadblock here. This is why sometimes Gus Malzahn didn't want this job. When he was the head coach at Arkansas State, and he agreed to it, and then he said, I don't think so. James Franklin took it instead. It's a Vandy problem. It's not a Clark Lee problem. It's not a Derek Mason problem. It's not a Jared Stillman problem. It's not a Woody Woodenhofer problem. It's not a Fred Pantkos problem. It's a Vandy problem. And I will say this, and I know we're partners with Vanderbilt. Their games air on Classic Hits 93.3. But I don't see Vanderbilt. Take Clark out of this. Take the coaches out of this. I don't see Vanderbilt willing to do their part to try to prove to people that they really, truly care and understand how far they have to go in order to close the gap. Have you ever been to Vanderbilt Stadium, Caroline?
I have not.
I'm going to tell you this. I thought Greer Stadium, where the Sounds used to play before they moved into First Horizon Park, I thought Greer Stadium was the worst stadium I've ever been in. And there were articles in the Tennessean when I was in high school that were like, the Brewers are leaving if we don't get a better stadium for them, and nobody in AAA is going to want to come here, was kind of the gist. And I think if we hadn't built that stadium this year when Major League Baseball realigned everything, I think they would have taken the AAA team away from us. But I think Vanderbilt Stadium is worse than that stadium. I mean, it's a dump. And what's Vanderbilt say? Oh, we're going to commit $300 million to fix. That's a practice facility in the SEC. That's not a stadium in the SEC. $300 million? And now I see people that say, well, hey, Vanderbilt, they're going to bridge this gap, and they're going to, and I look at this and think to myself, is that realistic? This was a lot easier in the past when, Floyd would just yell and scream about how Vanderbilt doesn't care. He doesn't think. He had an experience when he was the general manager of the Oilers, and they played a year at Vanderbilt Stadium where, and God, that was bad. I went to one game. I was 8. They lost to Ryan Leaf and the Chargers, and I was like, I'm not coming back to this stadium. No, sir. And then I went back the first time they played the Bengals in the first game at what is now Nissan Stadium. But they offered Vanderbilt to build new locker rooms for 1 year. They walked in and said, these are not NFL locker rooms. So the Oilers were going to build new locker rooms, use them for a year, and then give them back to Vanderbilt when they left. And Vanderbilt was like, no, we're good. No, we like our locker rooms the way they were. And I think from that moment on, he never took anything Vanderbilt said seriously. And I look at it and I'm like, it's hard for me when I know these coaches and I know what they're about. And it's hard for me to pin Saturday night's game on Clark Lee. Clark Lee is not that bad of a coach. Is Clark Lee a good coach? I don't know. I think he's a good coach, but I don't know. But I'm not judging Clark Lee off of Saturday night. And I'm not going to use Saturday night's game to throw dirt on Derek Mason, a guy who they ran out of here as if that 0-9 season last year was his fault. And that they didn't value the good things that he did do at a program where coaches don't win a lot. So you want to talk to me about the problems with Vanderbilt losing by 20 points to ETSU? It's not the coach. It's not the coach. Jordan Rodgers tried to tell me this 4 or 5 years ago. It's not about the coach. And I think Saturday night proved it.
How do you fix a problem that isn't rooted in anything that you can really fix? That's just a coach or finding a new quarterback or whatever it may be. How do you fix that? I'm
going to let you and Max ponder that, and I'm going to let the callers ponder it too. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. Again, Vanderbilt gets whacked by ETSU. And as I said, I don't think this is about the coaches. I think this is Vanderbilt. This is a look in the mirror moment for Vandy. You know who also needs to look in the mirror? TriStar Moving, my official movers, because they're doing a great job moving people just like me. I love TriStar Moving. My most recent experience with moving was, well, quite stressful, but TriStar made it a lot easier. I took multiple bids, and the one I liked the most was TriStar. Their owners, Garrett and Robert, they're cool dudes, and they care about helping you. And that was the thing that stood out to me, which is why I love them so much. TriStar Movers. They're TriStar Movers with 5-star service. From the initial phone call to the final signature, it was a breeze. With home protection, including covering the floors, banisters, railings, door jambs, and even the doors themselves. I absolutely love those guys. You know, I got a lot of TVs, protective boxes for them. They've even got a brand new state-of-the-art storage facility in Mount Juliet. This company is the real deal, and they're on the rise quickly, all due to the high standard that they hold, which, again, I can vouch for because I've used them. I had a buddy call me last week. He said, are these guys for real? I'm like, yes, Yes, they are for real. Give them a call, 615-640-1219, or visit their website, nationalmoving.org/radio. They'll give you 5% off your entire move. That's TriStar Moving, 615-640-1219, nationalmoving.org/radio. Tell them Jared Stillman sent you for 5% off your entire move. TriStar Moving, my official movers.
ETSU shows blitz. There is the blitz. Seals looks off to the right. He throws, and it is intercepted. ETSU picks it off at the 15, to the 20, down the far sideline. It's DeLynch to the 40, to the 30, to the house, and ETSU takes it nearly 100 yards.
Well, I think, we'll reconsider, a lot, but I don't know that the rotation of quarterbacks calls the pre-snap penalties. We had, a couple of false starts. We had a chop block that happened, obviously, post-snap, a couple of holds. I mean, that has nothing to do with the quarterback play. The plan was always to get Mike involved. I think there was a feel that, at the midpoint of the game, second, third quarter, you're really just trying to produce a spark.
That was Clark Lee. Clark Lee loses his opener by 20 points to ETSU. Now, as I said, I refuse to blame either coach. I'm not blaming Clark Lee. I'm not blaming Derek Mason. I'm not blaming either guy. But I think if I'm Candace Story-Lee, the athletic director at Vanderbilt, I'm sitting there in those stands. And, Max, you were there. I wasn't. Max is in for Ian. How many people were at that game on Saturday?
I was working on TV production, so I had the same view everybody watching on TV did.
So you didn't even see like a crowd shot at any point?
It was fine. I mean, there were a lot of fans on the home side.
Would you? Okay, that stadium seats what, 40,000?
Yeah, somewhere around there.
That is so dinky.
How many people do you think went?
I honestly have no idea. I wasn't in the stadium at all during the game.
25,000? 30,000? Vandy's got a hard time trying to sell these tickets.
But I mean, like, even even the stadium like being half full, like that, I feel like that's fair to assume from like a cupcake beginning of the season. Let's half full. That's 20,000 people. That's like how many people go to Vanderbilt?
Oh, well, you can't even. I mean, most people that go to Vanderbilt don't even care about sports.
No, but I'm saying that's probably less than the student body.
I mean, I'm just saying. No, it's definitely not less than the student body. This is Vanderbilt. This is not a college. This is not like a state school. This is Vanderbilt. I will say this about
it's not a lot of people.
I will say this about Vandy. And again, I go back to Vanderbilt has so much work to do. Not just from getting players, but getting people to care in this town. And I think that's something that I don't know if they truly understand. I don't know that. You know what's crazy? I've never had Candace Storey. How long has Candace Storey Lee been the athletic director at Vanderbilt for now, Max? 2 years?
What'd you say? Sorry.
I said, how long has Candace Storey Lee been the athletic director at Vanderbilt for? 2 years?
Yeah, she became the permanent AD during COVID, and it had been almost a year of interim before that.
Okay, so she's been the AD for 2 years.
Yeah.
She's never been on the show. Now, I don't know how often we've reached out, but you know that communication like that's a two-way street.
Yeah.
And when most people want to get something out or they want people to pay attention or they reach out to us. We've never had Jerry Stackhouse on the show. In fact, I'm blocked on Twitter by Jerry Stackhouse, and I don't even know what I did. I think to myself, you people sometimes don't understand. Like, you don't understand how far behind you are.
Have you had Danny White on the show?
No, I don't think so. I don't think we've ever reached out for him. I don't, again, and I would say this, though, for the Vols. They're not hurting for people to care about it.
Correct. And this is Nashville, not Knoxville.
Right. And we're also partners with Vanderbilt. Mm-hmm. This is a very popular afternoon show. And Vanderbilt haven't, no Jerry Stackhouse. Not like, all right. And you know me, I don't care. And I can't, I'm sure we've reached out for Candace Storey before. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've known Candace for a while now. I'm sure we've reached out before. I can't remember when. Like maybe when she got the job or maybe when she hired a coach or maybe but never been on. And I think Vanderbilt fired their entire PR staff, their entire sports PR staff, except for one guy, fired all of them like a year ago. And they brought in all these new people, and I'm not sure, though, I don't even know those people. And it's like, how can a PR people in this town, we don't ever have sounds players on. We don't ever have sounds players or sounds coaches on because it's the sounds. Like, now, if they were to have...
We love the sounds.
We love them. But people go to have a good time. They don't go to watch Aaron Ashby pitch. No disrespect to Aaron Ashby. But I got a great relationship with their PR guy. Got a great relationship with the Titans PR people. And so I don't even know the Vandy PR people. And that's where I think Vanderbilt's got to understand that ultimately all of that, the lack of PR out in the city, the lack of getting people excited, the lack of kind of a plan in that regard, the lack of that ultimately is going to kill you on the football end. Because you just lost by 20 to ETSU, and I'm not even sure that many people in town care. If today wasn't a holiday, or if the Titans had a game on Sunday, this may not even make the show. And I hate to say it, but that's where I feel like Vandy is, and that's why I can't blame either coach. That's why I didn't want them to fire Derek Mason, because I don't know how many other coaches can deal with some of the things that they have to deal with.
How shocked were you when you saw the score of the Vanderbilt ETSU game?
I mean, I was surprised. Like, I'm not going to front. I was surprised.
I was surprised, but I wasn't, no way.
Oh, I was.
Really?
ETSU sucks.
Well, I mean, like when I saw
they didn't have a football program in 2015.
To be fair, neither did UAB. But it wasn't one of those things that I saw that I was like, I just cannot believe it.
Oh, no, I could believe it.
Yes,
like, I mean,
that's my thing.
I could believe it.
Because to me, I was like, whoa. But, not that I expected it.
Max, what are your thoughts?
I expected it to be a slow start for Vandy and maybe close at halftime, but I was definitely expecting a double-digit win.
Do you think Vandy's going to win a game this year?
They will definitely beat UConn at home.
I don't know
wouldn't
about that.
say that.
I mean, didn't Colorado State lose to someone terrible? And they're a 6.5-point favorite this week against Vanderbilt?
They also lost to an FCS team, but it was South Dakota State, who's
Oh,
solid.
they're good.
They're
good.
Okay. But Vandy's a 6.5-point dog to Colorado State this weekend.
Dang.
I mean, that's bad. And I appreciate Max, who hosts the Commodore Hour, or not the Commodore Hour, hosts the Anchor Down podcast. Sorry about that, Max. Max, who hosts the Anchor Down podcast, not throwing Vanderbilt under the bus.
Well, yeah, he's got to stick up for his team.
Well, I'll give you Max credit on this point. He got on Vanderbilt's rear end a couple weeks ago. I was driving around and brought up something that I actually found to be kind of ridiculous, which is that Vandy's hasn't put some players on that Anchor Down podcast, and I think that's nuts. I mean, like, if you're going to do a podcast for Vanderbilt should be, oh, thank God somebody's doing this. And it goes on after the Commodore Hour, so there's more Vanderbilt programming on the station
it's
that people listen to. And
it's
they don't.
exposure.
I think it's, and Max, I know I'm probably putting you in a tough spot here, and I apologize for that. But I do think Vanderbilt does have some sort of a, they got to do better. They got to do better. And ultimately, the scoreboard never lies. Let's go to your text. 615-737-1025. Text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com.
One texter texts in and says 22,029 was the attendance at Vanderbilt.
That's what they announced.
Yes. That's how many people walked into the stadium that day.
You can pick like a C-level country artist in Nashville. C-level. Like, wouldn't be the main opener for a big-time person, but might be the first opener for a big-time person. And you can announce free concert on Broadway today with this guy.
More than 22,000.
It'd be kind of similar.
Yeah.
Like that's...
And I want to know, okay, so that was the attendance at the beginning of the game. What was the attendance after half?
Well, that was the attendance they announced. Yes. That's like, I forget who it was that has announced I think it's baseball maybe? No. It was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the preseason game that said tickets distributed was the figure that they put out there.
Oh, no.
Was total tickets distributed, not attendance.
Well, that counts for something.
But tickets distributed. Do you think there's any way to fix Vanderbilt?
It's going to be incredibly difficult, especially entering this new age of college football, of the 12-team playoff, of NIL, because I've said it before and I stand by it that with this new culture surrounding college football, the big will only get bigger and the small will only get smaller because there are two programs that are storied programs, very good programs coming into the SEC.
Let me say this. I really like Clark Lee.
He seems like a great guy.
If Clark
Lee
believes
in this team, he believes in this job.
And I don't want to throw Derek Mason under the bus because I liked him a lot too, but I never thought Derek Mason was a great football coach. Like I always thought he was, it's good for Vandy. I always thought that's what he was. I think Clark is a good coach. And I think there's a lot of people out there that think Clark's a good coach too. So if he can't get this right, there's going to be a lot of people that don't ever want to take this job. Because if Clark had said, no, I really love what we have here at Notre Dame, he probably could have gotten a better job. Because once you turn down a head coaching job, then it's like, oh, man, he's waiting for the right one. He's Brad Stevens to the Celtics kind of thing. And he didn't do that. He wants to turn this around. Now, I didn't think that this was the greatest hire of all time. I think it was a typical hire. Power 5 school hires a good coordinator from a program that's doing well. That's what they need. He's an alum. They do it. Fine. But I'm worried about him. Like, I'm worried about how tough the job is going to be to get this turned around.
Because I don't think that buy-in or effort, I don't think that's lacking on that team. I think it's just, they're just not good enough. They just don't have good enough players.
I felt bad for Derek Mason last year, and I still feel bad for him. Because they had all the COVID opt-outs last year, and
you're
no
destined to
non-conference
fail
games,
at that point.
And now I feel bad for Clark. And I hope Vanderbilt looks in the mirror. And I hope they don't look in the mirror and get mad at Clark. I hope they look in the mirror at themselves and say, holy smokes.
Because it gets to a certain point where you can continue to hire new coaches. And if they continue to not work out, maybe at the end of the day, the coach isn't the issue. Maybe it's the process. Maybe it's the program.
And that's what Jordan Rodgers tried to tell me 4 or 5 years ago. And I'm not sure I completely listened, but now I understand. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. Coming up next, overreaction after week 1. Caroline's got some questions. We will discuss that next. Stillman and Company, it's ESPN 1025 The Game. Let me tell you about my friends at Edmunds. Buying a car can be overwhelming. I know I hate having to figure out all the different cars that I'm going to test drive, and then I test drive one, and I'm like, okay, is this going to be good if I go well, and it's just so difficult. You're trying to find the best prices. And now the demand is back and in full swing. Lucky for you, my friends at Edmunds have been taking the stress out of car shopping for over 50 years. Their editors drive over 500,000 miles every year, testing thousands of hours on hundreds of new vehicles. They review almost every car on the market and rank the best ones in each category, so you can narrow that search and compare options side by side to find the best vehicle for you. That's right. They've got helpful filters like color, model, special features, engine type, drivetrain, price, distance, etc. They're just so great. I absolutely love them. Edmunds is here to guide you to your perfect vehicle. Visit Edmunds.com to see their best car rankings and to search for vehicles near you. That's EDMUNDS.com, because for cars, there's Edmunds.
That is going to do it. The biggest win under Chip Kelly. UCLA takes down number 16 LSU. And in relatively convincing fashion.
How sad were you with that one? Were you surprised? After I had said all week in my FanDuel spots, I had said all week that was the game I was picking.
Just sad isn't even the right word. Just so defeated. At the point where at the half I knew we were not going to win that game because LSU looked like absolute garbage on fire in the trash. And I was just so defeated.
You know what's so funny is I looked at this game and I'm having a hard time watching UCLA games. Like they played last week against Hawaii, they played this week. Mm-hmm. Floyd's in the Hall of Fame at UCLA. And I have a hard time right now, like watching a UCLA game and, just kind of focusing on the game. He hates Chip Kelly. I mean, like when they hired him,
Why?
it was like, because he thinks he can't, because he thinks it's all smoke and mirrors.
Okay.
I think that's why. And when they hired him, and like Chip Kelly, because remember, Florida had sniffed around at Chip Kelly. And like the way the story goes is if Florida hires Chip Kelly, then Tennessee hires Dan Mullen. But when Dan Mullen was going to go to Tennessee, but then when Florida came open, he went and said, I'll take Florida instead of Tennessee.
Right.
And just watching that, I'm like, man, I bet the GM is so happy UCLA's winning, but I just know in my heart that if we were to do the show with him today, say, hey, how about them Bruins? He'd be like, I'm so proud, but that coach, well, I tell you, I guarantee it. Let's go to your phones. Then we got some overreactions to discuss today. Jeff is up next on Vanderbilt. Thank you for calling the show. Go ahead, Jeff.
Hey, thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
I am going to respond to how to turn Vanderbilt around based on exactly what you just said about an hour ago. It's recruiting. I mean, the bottom line, it's about the players. The difference between Franklin and Mason was Franklin went after players. He recruited like crazy. He flew helicopters into high school games. Mason didn't. So the level of talent dropped quite a bit. And over time, it's continued to drop. If Lee wants to make a difference, he needs to do exactly what you said, which is get him a recruiting staff. If he gets a recruiting staff and he can go nationwide with this recruiting.
He's already got that.
Start to identify players at low levels like 9th grade, 10th grade that have GPA qualifications to get into Vanderbilt and go after them hard and continue to do that over the course of 2 or 3 years and start to get the talent level up at Vanderbilt, then Lee will be as successful as another person that's at Vanderbilt, which is Corbin, because that's exactly what Corbin did. Corbin came into a program that was subpar, recruited, got the players, built a system around it that didn't feed into beating people. It fed into putting kids into the major leagues, and now it's just a pipeline.
Do you know how hard that is to build, though?
It is, but you've got to start at a baseline. And
I think Clark has done that, and I appreciate your call, Jeff. Like, I think Clark Lee has done that. I mean, he hired Barton Simmons. Like, he's got a recruiting staff. He's got analysts. He flew a helicopter on Friday to MBA and then to Pope John Paul. Like, he's doing what you said he's doing. And I think there are a lot of similarities between him and Tim Corbin. I don't think people understand how hard it is to do what Tim Corbin did. And that it's a lot harder nowadays because everybody has money. This isn't one of these things where it's like, well, if we can get more money than all the schools have money. Look how much Arkansas pours into all of their programs. Tim Corbin is the very best, perhaps, at what he does in the entire country. And you're asking Clark Lee to do that, which is going to be even harder. Like that, you're asking a lot of Clark Lee in order to be able to do that. Now, I think he's doing all of the things that you said, but then he has to keep those kids from going to Northwestern and Stanford and everything else. And it goes back to last year in a pandemic, which is if you've got the grades to go to Vanderbilt, if you've got the grades and you've got the brains, you know that you're more likely to go be successful doing whatever it is you want to do than it is playing in the NFL. Though Jay Cutler made a lot of money playing in the NFL at Vanderbilt, and there have been a lot of guys. So it's possible. But most of those guys that are really, really smart probably say, hey, look, there's a 2% chance that you make it to the NFL. Mm-hmm. And even then, the careers are short, and I can go be a doctor right now. When you have something like last year showed you Vanderbilt, Max, correct me if I'm wrong, Vanderbilt had to lead the country, lead the SEC in opt-outs last year.
At least by percentage of the roster, yeah.
I mean, they had so many opt-outs last year.
It was sad.
And they had but that's going to happen. Because when you recruit those kids, football is not the most important thing in the world to them. Like, it's not.
And it's also, and I hear the caller, you can recruit as hard as you possibly can, but that doesn't necessarily mean that player, that kid is going to go to your program.
No.
Because if Vanderbilt wants to recruit the players that are going to make a difference for their football team, chances are they're good enough to go elsewhere in the SEC or elsewhere, like you mentioned, Stanford or Northwestern or really anywhere else in the country. So if they look at what Vanderbilt has had, what they have accomplished over the past few years, as opposed to, Northwestern, who had a pretty good run last year, you look at Stanford or look at any of these other programs, what's stopping them from going there? Why is Vanderbilt special? You can fly a helicopter all you want, but you know who else has a helicopter? Every other college football coach in the entire country.
You know who's got a $100 million practice facility right on the water of Lake Michigan? Northwestern does. So it's the money. Vanderbilt talks about their Vandy United campaign and how much money they're going to raise. They're raising $300 million.
Which is a lot of money.
For a minor league baseball stadium.
Yes.
Is that what you're trying to build? Like an amphitheater?
It already is a minor league baseball stadium. First Tennessee Park, I might have to say. First Horizon Park might be a better stadium.
Than Vandy's football stadium?
Yeah.
Might be.
Is.
You really have never been there.
Well, so I stayed at the hotel that overlooks Vanderbilt Stadium.
The Marriott?
Yeah. And so I looked at it there. So I looked at it.
Okay.
I've never been inside. I've never been to a game.
I will say this. I went to a game. They played Tennessee. It was packed. Pruitt's first year.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember thinking, and I thought this in the Georgia game, where I'm like, if there's knock on wood, but if there's a bomb or there's something that goes on in that stadium, there's no way to get out. It's like a death trap in that stadium. I mean, it is older than dirt. It's a terrible stadium. The fact that they played NFL games there 30 years ago, I cannot comprehend.
And that was 30 years ago.
And it was like a desperate situation. The Oilers tried Memphis, and they couldn't do that, and they had to find somewhere to play, so they played there. If they could have played at Bridgestone Arena, they would have. It was that bad. And, I mean, it's just $300 million is not going to get it done. And that's where I look at all these problems, and I'm like, it's not a Clark problem. It's not a Derek problem. That's where Vanderbilt is. And then you say, well, here's what Vanderbilt needs to do. Well, all these other schools, they commit more. And so I have a tough time with that. 615-737-1025. We'll get to your overreactions from week one. We'll do that coming up next. Stillman and Company right here on ESPN 1025 The Game. Let me tell all the fine folks out there that you can win a pair of tickets to see Vanderbilt take on Stanford. That's right. Vanderbilt take on Stanford. All you've got to do is head on over to YouTube and subscribe to 1025 The Game's YouTube page, and you'll enter to win your way into the game. That's right. A winner will be announced 1 week from today. That's Vanderbilt Stanford on September 18th. And by the way, you can see this handsome face right there. YouTube every single day. Just put in Stillman and Company while we're on the air, and boom, you got us. Love it. Stillman and Company, it's ESPN 1025 The Game. We're streaming on the Game Nashville app. And Company, week 1 in the books. Caroline's got overreactions, underreactions. How are we supposed to react to week 1? So I'll just turn the floor over to you.
So, yeah, exactly. So are these some of our overreactions? Are we thinking too far into it from week 1? Or is it kind of fair to say, even though it's just week 1, is it fair to say that? So I will ask you.
Oh, I love that.
Is this an overreaction to think that this is the beginning of the end for Clemson?
Oh.
It's tough to say.
No, because the ACC sucks.
Okay, so to your point earlier about DJ Uyunglele, if it's not the beginning of the end, then how could he possibly, be beat out by the starting quarterback job by some other guy?
Because if they win all the games this year that are on their schedule the rest of the way, and then they get just smacked by Oklahoma. Although Oklahoma didn't look very good either.
Oklahoma almost got smacked by Tulane.
They just get embarrassed by somebody in the playoff, a la what happened to them in 2017 with Kelly Bryant, or 18 or whatever year it was. If that happens, then I personally believe that, they'll go find somebody better because they recruit so well. It's like, Alabama.
But that won't happen mid-season.
No, but I'm talking about, who cares if you win the rest of the – Clemson doesn't care if they win the rest of their games against the Dukes. They just care that they don't lose them. They want their quarterback to go out there and be able to beat Ohio State, be able to go beat Oklahoma and Alabama and all the things that Trevor Lawrence and Deshaun Watson did. And so if they don't find that, then they'll go get another quarterback, and they'll think that guy can do it. And that's what I think Uyunglele has to worry about.
That was a good one.
Thank you.
Overreaction, or fair to say, Georgia's ticket to the college football playoff is already punched.
Oh, definitely not fair. Georgia has screwed up so many things in the past. I mean,
that is so true.
To
be a Georgia/Atlanta sports fan, I'm sure has got to be miserable.
I mean, Georgia, if anything, Georgia made the winner of the SEC an automatic qualifier to the playoff. The problem is that that's always the case. So I'm not sure that really changes much, but it does change things if it comes down to Georgia versus Clemson in the end, or somebody better than Georgia versus Clemson in the end. Then that team will get into the playoff, I would assume, over Clemson. But no. I mean, to say that, look, Kentucky, the most impressive team of the weekend in the SEC was Kentucky.
Yeah, Kentucky was very
the
impressive.
team that all of a sudden, we've seen Kentucky for years, and we've thought, hey, they have enough players on defense to compete, not against Alabama, but everybody else.
And they're in the East.
Put out a team. Right. They can compete with Florida on defense, but they just haven't been able to throw a forward pass. This kid came out, and I know it was Louisiana Monroe, who Nick Saban didn't beat in his first year at Alabama. And this kid.
That was Louisiana Tech.
No, it was Louisiana Monroe.
Oh, Nick Saban was Louisiana Monroe?
Yeah.
Okay.
This kid was throwing it all over the ball yard on Saturday. The kid that beat out Joey Gatewood. I can't even remember his name.
Will Levis.
He eats the banana with the peel on it.
Will Levis.
I mean, he was just chucking the ball. Now, he may not be any good, but again, the most impressive team, in my opinion, week 1 was Kentucky. And so I look at Georgia's schedule, and look, Florida's probably not good enough this year to beat them, and Kentucky's probably not good enough to beat them this year, and so they probably should win those games. Auburn's probably not good enough to beat them, so they should win that game. But we're talking about Georgia. So, no, their ticket is not punched.
My take on this is it definitely gives them a better shot.
Well, duh. I mean, they beat the second best team in the country.
Easy. Let me talk.
They beat the second best team in the country. No duds helps them out.
If they do lose a regular season SEC game, I do think it could still be a possibility that Georgia makes it in the college football playoff with this win.
Georgia loses to Florida, still wins the East,
yes.
Loses to Alabama, they're not getting into the playoff.
A one-loss Georgia team that beat
loss.
Clemson.
Because they lose in the SEC title.
Conference championship, yeah.
Could you imagine the arguments if Georgia loses one game to Kentucky, Kentucky wins the East, gets slaughtered by Alabama, and now you're deciding, do you put a one-loss Georgia team that didn't even win their division into the playoff over a one-loss Clemson team that won the ACC?
I mean, you put Clemson in.
Didn't lose to Kentucky.
And lost to Georgia, who lost to Kentucky. But I think on the surface, it's always, I feel like it's such recency bias. Because
they'll forget about
by the time, by
one.
December, they're going to be like, it was week 1. They just lost to Kentucky. It's so much recency bias. So yeah, in that scenario, Clemson gets in.
So now you got to pull back what you just said.
But it doesn't feel fair. But it definitely gives them a better shot.
It doesn't feel fair today. But
Yes.
just imagine, you won your conference. You lost one game. The other team didn't even win their division.
Who's Georgia's out of division game? Arkansas?
They play Auburn every year.
They play Auburn every year.
And I don't know who their other one is.
But let's
it's not
let's say they lose that game to Auburn. They can still go to the SEC championship.
Yeah, no, that's why it has to be an East team. It has to be an East team that doesn't lose an East game.
For them to stay out of the college football playoff.
No, for them to stay out of the SEC championship game.
Yes. And then also subsequently the college football playoff.
But I almost think you got a better argument if they're fighting for Clemson for the 4th spot and they don't go to the title game, because then they don't have to lose to Alabama, which is what Alabama did a couple of years ago when Auburn beat them, won the West. Georgia beat Auburn. Mm-hmm. Georgia got into the playoff, and Alabama, who didn't even win their division, got into the playoff. The one thing I've learned about the committee, though, is that they don't take into account what they did last year or 2 years ago and say, this is not the Supreme Court, where they take the precedents that have been set ahead of them and say, well, in Monroe versus Johnson, this is what happened. Mm-hmm. They don't ever say that in 2014 we took Ohio State because they won their conference championship and not Baylor and TCU because they didn't, and then apply that in 2017, which they didn't do. So it's very, very odd. What's your next one?
Vanderbilt. Overreaction or fair to say? Vanderbilt will not win a single game this year.
Max thinks they're going to beat UConn. If they don't beat UConn, I don't see how they can win a game this year.
No. I mean, if you're not going to beat ETSU and UConn,
it's week 1.
You're not going to beat Florida. Georgia.
Teams do get better though throughout the course of its season.
Yeah, and it's a new coach. You're in a new system. It's going to take some time for things to settle in. You would just hope that you have good enough players and a good enough, initial understanding of the system that you can at least beat ETSU.
Do you think that they will win a game?
It's tough to say. And right now, I don't think they do.
Max, do you think they win a game this year?
Yes.
Which one?
UConn.
They don't have a chance to beat Stanford.
They're not going to beat Stanford.
Stanford scored one touchdown this week, and it was in garbage time.
Well, Vanderbilt didn't score any.
Right, so it's possible.
Who did Stanford play?
Kansas State.
Oh, no. Stanford will beat Vanderbilt. I mean, it's not like they lost to East Kansas State University. They lost to Kansas State University. Oh, goodness gracious. All right, give me another one.
Next one. LSU, overreaction or fair to say, LSU in 2019 was the exception to what this program actually is, and UCLA beating them proves that.
I do believe that I think LSU is going to start divorcing its 2019 success from Ed Orgeron. So it's kind of like hey, you were a passenger, not a driver. If that makes sense. Like the more everybody who ever loved LSU or ever cared about LSU, or even if you don't love LSU, everybody will forever associate LSU's 2019 title run as one of the better teams in the history of college football. Mm-hmm. Nobody ever looks at the 2004 LSU championship, or 2003, when they beat Oklahoma, and nobody ever says that it was about Matt Mock, or it was about Glenn Dorsey, or it was about Chad Lavallee, or those kind of guys.
It was about Nick Saban.
It was about Saban. And that's because history since then has proven that LSU championship was about Saban. Mm-hmm. What I think is going to happen here is the more Ed Orgeron loses at LSU, and they're going to lose in the SEC this year, the more he loses, the more everybody is going to say, well, that was Joe Burrow, that was Joe Brady. And that's why I told you, I think ultimately LSU is going to find a way to fire Ed Orgeron, and they're going to go hire Joe Brady because they're going to talk themselves into the fact that Joe Brady was the reason for their success in 2019. And that if they don't go get Joe Brady right now and they don't go pay Joe Brady right now, then Joe Brady's going to go be an NFL head coach in a couple of years, and they can't risk that. So they're going to talk themselves in, I think, to firing Orgeron and hiring Joe Brady.
My only point to that is the guys who won that championship. I mean, you mentioned Joe Brady. Yes, of course, he was a key cog in that national championship. But you look at Joe Burrow, you look at Justin Jefferson, you look at Jamar Chase. Those guys probably could have gone wherever they wanted. But they went to LSU, and that's Ed Orgeron's recruiting.
Yes, but LSU, I mean, I said this when Ed Orgeron got the job, and I was against it. Mm-hmm. And somebody said, well, Ed Orgeron's got great recruits coming to LSU. And I said, Jared Stillman could go recruit at LSU. Like, anybody could go recruit at LSU. Les Miles recruited at LSU.
The point that you made earlier about Nick Saban, where were kids from Louisiana going? Alabama, Auburn, Georgia, Florida.
Right, but Nick's already, Nick put he put the gate up on that. Ed Orgeron's Ron Zook. Like, that's what he is. And what's going to happen is, it's like Gene Chizik. Mm-hmm. And see, this is another thing. People talk themselves into this kind of stuff. And so Gene Chizik wins the title at Auburn because he's got Cam Newton. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden he doesn't have Cam Newton. They're not very good anymore. They fire Gene Chizik and they go out and they get Gus Malzahn, who was the offensive coordinator then. Because they talked themselves into it wasn't Gene, it was Gus.
It was Gus.
And that's exactly what LSU's going to do, where they talk themselves into it wasn't Ed, it was Joe. And then they're going to go get Joe Brady. Regardless of whether or not Joe Brady gets a Joe Burrow, they're going to go do that because that's what they're going to sell to themselves in their own minds. And that's the precedent that we've set in college football. 615-737-1025. We'll hit the headlines with Caroline, and we'll do that coming up next. Invigorate Health, my guys. That's right. Look, I'm in my 30s right now, and I just spent the weekend on a bachelor party trip, and I was like, I'm not in my 20s anymore, and I needed my friends at Invigorate Health. I kept thinking all day yesterday, why did I not call Invigorate Health to come and get me one of those IV therapy treatments they have that, again, will get you hydrated, but also they'll help your mental clarity. They'll help everything in your body. But IV treatment is not all what they do. They've also got hormone replacement therapy where they're trained physicians and nurses. They'll take your blood. They'll say, okay, you need this testosterone or you need that, and we can add to it, and they'll put you on the right regimen to make you feeling better, feeling younger, increase your vitality. And, of course, if you're trying to cut those pounds, they can do that. Plus, the M-Sculpt Neo, that is not some invasive procedure or anything. Nope. They are these machines that you literally get put on, and then it just starts vibrating right on you. And exactly how it works, I don't know, but I do know that it reduces 93% of visual cellulite. I absolutely love my friends at Invigorate Health. That's InvigorateHealthTN.com. Again, if you're just feeling older, just go see them for a consultation. It's easy. Invigorate Health. InvigorateHealthTN.com. That's InvigorateHealthTN.com. Tell them Jared Stillman sent you.
From the Game Nashville studios, it's Stillman and Company. Delivered by TriStar Moving. TriStar Movers with 5-star service. With Jared Stillman on Nashville's best sports talk.
ESPN.
1025 The Game and the Game Nashville app.
Stillman and Company is delivered by TriStar Moving, ESPN 1025 The Game. I say we give away something here at the end of the segment. How do you feel about that?
I like that a lot.
Okay, it is a holiday, so we will go ahead and we will do that. But big weekend of college football, the NFL Week 1 right in front of us. By the way, did you see this in Peter King's article in Football Morning in America? Mm-hmm. This year, apparently they're going to have 2 doubleheaders. So, it used to be Fox would have a noon game, CBS would have a noon game. They're both localized. And it could be like the Atlanta Falcons and the Arizona Cardinals on Fox. And the Titans are playing somebody else. And then one network has the late game, and it's like Kansas City, New England, or it's Dallas and Green Bay, or whatever. Now they're both going to have doubleheaders, I think, every week.
I did not see that, but that is very interesting.
So apparently, according to Peter King, that one network's doubleheader gets about 24 million viewers.
Okay.
The hope with 2 networks showing different games is that they can get about 36 million viewers.
Wow.
So my dad asked me the other day, or asked me today, he said, why is Dallas, Tampa Bay Thursday night? Like, why is that he goes, I mean, I know Dallas has a lot of fans and they'll all watch, but why would they play that?
That's it, because they've got a lot of fans and they'll all watch.
Because it's Dallas versus Tom Brady, and the NFL loves putting out there that highest watch television show ever, and that's exactly what Dallas and Tom Brady do for you on TV. With that, it's time for Headlines with Caroline.
We're spanning the sports world. It's Headlines with Caroline on Stillman and Company, right here on Nashville's best sports talk,
ESPN
1025 The Game and the Game Nashville app.
So we broke down a lot of the more watched games, Georgia Clemson, Alabama Miami, but there were some games that probably didn't watch. Pretty exciting. Presbyterian College beat St. Andrews. Did you see the score?
No.
84-43. And Presbyterian College did not punt one single time during that game. Coach Kevin Kelly, he's in his first year at Presbyterian, so he's notorious.
Oh, yeah, he's the go for it on fourth down?
Punting. Yeah, he never punts the ball. He just onside kicks, goes for 2 almost every single time. Their quarterback, Ren Heffley, put up 538 yards and 10 touchdowns. So if you're looking to put some money on Presbyterian College, just hammer the over every time.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't like the Arena League, although I did as a kid with the Nashville Cats, and I don't like this. I mean, I've got guts, but I also don't want to be next to somebody at a blackjack table who hits a 19 and gets a 6.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't want to be there. And that's why I see with Presbyterian. That's all I got on Presbyterian. What's next?
I mean, it's not pretty football, but it's football.
It's something.
So, Brian Kelly had some interesting comments in his post-game interview after beating Florida State 41-28 in overtime. This is what he had to say on the field.
Brian, this game had it all. Yeah. What did you think of your team's ability to withstand Florida State's impressive comeback?
Yeah, I'm in favor of execution. Maybe our entire team needs to be executed after tonight. I mean, we just didn't execute very well.
What's up? Maybe your entire team should be executed? Interesting comments to make. And, of course, it was a tip of his hat to former Bucs coach John McKay, who said the same thing. How'd you feel about your execution? Well, I'm in favor of execution. But he got a little bit of heat on Twitter, on social media. There were a lot of conversations surrounding his comments, and here's what he had to say to defend himself in his post-game press conference.
Then in your post-game interview, right after the game, about executing the entire team. Can you elaborate on that?
Oh, it's an old John McKay quote. I was kidding. It was tongue-in-cheek. It wasn't funny. It's an old John McKay quote that he used after the game. So I was talking and making a joke about it. Why, it was taken serious. Are you people crazy?
I'm sure.
Not everyone knows you like we do, Brian.
Oh, it's a John McKay quote that he used after a game. I was stealing one of his old quotes and being funny. I guess nobody likes to be funny anymore. So, yeah, if you want to, take me to town on that, please do.
Okay. So I hear him. I get it. It's a former coach said it. I feel like he probably could have said, in the words of John McKay, I'm in favor of execution. Just kind of weird comments from Brian Kelly.
I would say two things. One, here's a rule about inside jokes when you're talking to the public. You can't make them.
Yeah.
Like, I have told radio hosts this all the time. Radio hosts love inside jokes. They love it. It's like they love the little inside joke between two. It never works because the audience never knows what you're talking about.
And how fun is it to be a third wheel in a conversation when they're
you
just
don't know
inside jokes? It's
right.
Like, okay,
I mean,
I'll just go over here.
Then again, Brian Kelly's job is not really to talk to the public, though he's a head coach at Notre Dame. So you're
but that
do
is
a
in
lot
your
of that,
contract.
so
You talk to the media. You talk to the public.
So he didn't execute the joke very well.
Good one.
Thank you. But at the same time, no, the cancel culture police do not need to get worked up about Brian
Yes,
Kelly.
he did. Yes, it was a joke just when it was tongue in cheek, but maybe context or maybe just don't.
I will give credit though to Katie George who asked the question.
She smooth, cool as a cucumber when he said it.
So I've known Katie George for 10 years maybe.
She's wonderful.
And Katie, she's been through a lot of different situations. She was a great volleyball player.
Mm-hmm.
A great volleyball player. But she, really, to your point, she didn't back down, didn't panic, didn't anything. And I will say, in my heart, and I feel this way because, again, I've known Katie George for a long time. I know her fiance really well. She's good people. If Maria Taylor's backstabbing of Rachel Nichols is good news for anybody, I think it's Katie. And I hope that how there's a silver lining in everything, and I don't like what Maria Taylor did, and I don't like what's happened to Rachel Nichols, and I don't like any of it, but if that means that we get more
someone
Katie
needs to
George,
fill that role.
If it means we get more Katie George on our TV and Katie George continues to excel and she continues to stay the person that she's always been, good for sports.
She is a very, very nice person and wonderful at what she does. So, 10-year veteran Tyrod Taylor was officially announced the starting quarterback for the Houston Texans. And I think we kind of all assumed that this would be the case, but it was made official today. So he will start week 1 against Jacksonville Jaguars. Davis Mills, their fourth round pick out of Stanford, will be Taylor's backup. Deshaun Watson is on the 53-man roster, but he's expected to be a healthy scratch for every game this season, which is probably a good way to go about it for the Houston Texans.
Yeah, I feel so bad for that. I don't know what the Texans do.
Rough situation.
I don't know what the Texans do. Tyrod Taylor is a poor man's Ryan Fitzpatrick. They've been around the league.
And it doesn't feel like Ryan
everywhere.
Fitzpatrick is a rich man's anything.
No, but they've started everywhere. And Fitzpatrick is, they both started in Buffalo.
Mm-hmm.
Tyrod went to the playoffs in Buffalo. People forget about that. But no, he's not any good. Texans are going to be terrible. They're going to be picking a quarterback, whether it's with their pick or somebody else's pick that they get for trading Deshaun Watson this year. But kind of feels like the lost season. By the way, speaking of the Texans, I do want to thank Nick Caserio, the general manager there. Did you see what he did last week?
I did not.
He had his preseason press conference, and he opened it up talking to the Houston media. Caserio was in New England.
Mm-hmm.
He was the number 2 in New England when Scott Pioli left. Pioli was Belichick's number 2 for forever. Pioli goes to Kansas City to be the general manager. Belichick turns that number 2 position into a 2-man job, hires Floyd Reese from ESPN, and elevates Nick Caserio. And I've never been told this. My guess is Floyd was kind of the guy that Bill probably listened to, and Caserio was kind of a guy they were developing into that. And Caserio's been with Belichick, the whole time. And he opened his press conference talking about how important Floyd Reese was to him, and how important Floyd Reese was to the people of Houston when he was the Oilers general manager, and talked for a solid 2 minutes before the press conference. And every member of the Houston media tweeted about it, about how kind his words were and everything else. And it was one of those things where I'm going to just crap on the Texans this year because they're going to be so bad. And Caserio was put in a tough spot, but I think he's handled the Watson situation all wrong, from the jump. And he's in a tough spot, which I feel bad for. But you say something nice about Floyd, you're going to be on my good side right now. Cool. So I want to give Caserio, a thank you for that, because I think the more that people talk about the impact that Floyd had on their lives, the more he's still around with us. Mm-hmm. And you have a hard time letting certain things go. What's next?
So another NFL team that's going to be in a little bit of a tough situation this season, the Cowboys will be without Zach Martin, their offensive lineman, for Thursday's season opener against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It was announced yesterday that he tested positive for COVID. He's a 6-time Pro Bowler, a huge loss for the Cowboys offensive line. And if I'm the Cowboys, I'm nervous about sending Dak Prescott, who's coming off of not one but 2 injuries, a leg and an arm injury, out there in front of an offensive line without probably their best offensive line.
Can I say something that I don't feel like you'll hear on ESPN or Fox or any other show or station or anything?
Sure.
Where they just won't say it as bluntly.
Say it.
The Cowboys are going to suck this year.
And
nobody will say it. It is amazing. The Cowboys are gonna suck. I watched First Take today, and Michael Irvin has the 5 reasons why the Cowboys are Super Bowl contenders.
I heard it on First Take that Sam Acho said, they were asking, is it going to be a blowout or is it going to be a close game between the Cowboys and the Bucs? Sam Acho said, easily a close game. What?
They won't say it. The rights holders of the NFL will not say the Dallas Cowboys are going to suck. They are afraid to say it. And I think they're afraid for 2 reasons. One is because they have Cowboy games. They want people to watch the Cowboys. But 2, because there are so many Cowboy fans in the audience that they think that they will alienate everybody if they say that. And it's crazy. The Cowboys are going to be terrible. They're going to be awful. They are awful. And they may win that division, but that doesn't...
I don't think they're going to be awful.
They're going to be awful this year.
I don't think that it's going to be a close game with Tampa Bay. But I'm not going to say they're going 2-15.
I think the Cowboys are like a 6-11 team.
Dang.
I think they're 6-11. They got no defense.
But do you think they win that division going 6-11?
That's a pretty bad division.
Yeah, it's true.
Ryan Fitzpatrick's the best quarterback in the division.
Oh, God.
That's not Dak. But Dak's been off for a year and is always hurt. So now and with these guys, I saw Marcus break his ankle. The same. Dak broke his ankle. Marcus broke his leg. I saw Marcus break his leg and never be the same player again. That
was a nasty break.
Derek Carr was an MVP candidate before he broke his leg. He might not be a starting quarterback now. That's where we are with all of this. Those are headlines.
Derek Carr is a starting quarterback.
But for how long?
I guess that same question is around every starting quarterback.
No, but I think with Carr, I think Gruden, if they get to a point where they don't think they can win big with Carr, I think they're out on Carr. And then he becomes a Tannehill.
Yeah.
Goes somewhere else. Headlines with Caroline. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. Speaking of ridiculous things they'll say on TV, Harry Douglas has entered our minds with another one. Former Titan receiver Harry Douglas went to a great school at the University of Louisville, but other than that, Harry said some crazy things. The craziest thing Harry had to say, which happens to do with the Titans. We'll do that next. Stillman and Company right here on ESPN 1025. The Game. Be the first caller right now. Let's just do first caller.
Yeah.
First one to get it.
Be quick with it.
615-737-1025. You're going to win a pair of tickets to the Highland Games and Celtic Festival at Percy Warner Park this Saturday. The festival is a fun-filled day with Celtic games, Scottish and Irish dancers, Celtic music, kids activities, food, and so much more. Tickets are on sale now. Visit midtngames.com for more details. Stillman and Company, ESPN 1025, The Game on a Labor Day. So I'll say this about First Take, and I'll say this about TV. TV has now become who can say the most ridiculous things to get on television.
Well, it goes viral.
But you know what's crazy? You know what's crazy about this for me? Is I bet there are so many people out there that hear me say things like, all they do is just say crazy things to get on TV and stay on TV and whatever. And I know there's a portion of our audience that feels like I do that, but I really don't. Like, I really don't do that. Like, I may, make something a bigger deal than it should be because I got 4 hours to fill. But the idea that I'm going to get it, like when I just told you the Cowboys are going to be awful, I really believe the Cowboys are going to be bad this year. Like, I'm not sitting there thinking to myself, I think the Cowboys will be middle of the road, but let me just say they're going to be bad so that more people will pay attention. I don't do that. And people think I do that. I do not. Everything that I say, like, I truly believe.
I can vouch for that.
Like that Julio Jones story last week about him not wanting to run out on a play that was designed for him. Like, that
bad.
Bothers me a lot.
That's bad.
Like, I worry about it. So Harry Douglas used to play wide receiver for the Tennessee Titans. A very unrememberable tenure with the Tennessee Titans. Mike Mularkey loved Harry Douglas like a child. I never understood why he wouldn't cut him. And then he said, Harry's like a coach in the room, which I always then interpreted with the response of, then why don't you make him a coach? Which I never got an answer to, though I never actually asked that. I just did it on the radio. But Harry Douglas has gone on to First Take and said some very crazy things, like Julio Jones being the best wide receiver in the NFL, which we thought was crazy. But apparently he upped the game in terms of saying crazy stuff on television. Here's what he said.
Damn it, the Tennessee Titans, I'm predicting, going to go to the Super Bowl this year. Now, is that good enough for y'all? Now, react, Acho.
I just got a question.
There we go. Clip that for Instagram.
So what happened to Patrick Mahomes?
No, he's still there.
Like, what happened to Tyrann Mathieu in that defense, too?
He's still there.
So how are they getting the Super Bowl? They're playing the same division.
He's there.
So explain.
Last time I checked, before last, the Titans beat the Kansas City Chiefs in the regular season. I remember them beating them.
Okay. But in the playoffs.
Okay.
Like, what happened?
Expound on it. Talk about
the last time I checked, the Tennessee Titans has a roster to make a Super Bowl run. If they put everything together, they have an opportunity to win a Super Bowl in Tennessee.
And that was what Harry Douglas said. How crazy is what Harry Douglas said? Now, I'm going to say this. Harry is not a TV veteran. He's done some stuff, and he was always a good interview when he played. So as a guy that, we went to the same college. Now, we didn't go to college at the same time, and we didn't know each other until he was a wide receiver here. But as somebody who kind of saw him in college, saw his college career and heard everybody talk about how great Harry Douglas was at Louisville, then saw him as a wide receiver for the Titans, had him on the show. It's a good interview. Mularkey loved the guy, thought he was like a coach in the room, and now he's doing TV. But he doesn't have a ton of TV experience.
He has a good bit of radio experience.
He's got like a year of experience.
Uh-huh.
But like his response where he was like, you know what? Titans are going to go to the Super Bowl. Now what are you going to say about that? Was like kind of like the classic tell of like, hey, I just said something crazy so that you all will react to it. And he really didn't have much to back up his take. That being said, how crazy is what Harry Douglas said? On a crazy scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being Jacksonville's going to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I think it's like a 6 or a 7. Because to Harry's point, like, yes, this roster has Pro Bowlers. This roster has incredible players. But to Sam Acho's point, although I think Sam Acho says some ridiculous things, what about Patrick Mahomes? What about Kansas City? What about Tyrann Mathieu and that Kansas City defense? Because I see Harry's point that on paper, the Titans have an outstanding roster. They have a ton of talent on that team. But it's not more talented than Kansas City. And you cannot get to the Super Bowl if you don't pass Kansas City in the AFC Championship. So I think for that reason alone, that they're just, like, the Titans are good, but there are other teams that are just better, I think it makes it pretty crazy.
I have a hard time sitting there looking at this thinking that that's, like, I know what he's doing. See, this is what bothers me about it is Michael Irvin gets on TV today and gives you 5 reasons why the Cowboys are going to make the Super Bowl. Michael Irvin is crazy. but it works on TV. Like, I find Michael Irvin interesting on TV. You know, when he gets on there and he says, and it's always him crying about the Cowboys, which is exactly why he's there. But it could be ESPN, NFL Network. He's going to get on there, say something, and go, do you? When Jared Jones told me that, do you? I felt like, and then he goes, and then he like turns into like a preacher talking about the Cowboys. He's done it for forever. He like sweats through his suit. It's crazy.
His veins do bulge out kind of when he talks about
But
the
it's
Cowboys.
more interesting than boring Max Kellerman, so I have to give them credit for that. Harry Douglas is trying to build a character. Dan Orlovsky is the definition. Dan Orlovsky is on ESPN because he used to put up videos on Twitter going over X's and O's. And people would retweet it or whatever. And so Dan got a job on ESPN. Now Dan says crazy stuff all the time, and all they do is keep putting him back on TV. And I hear this, and I'm like, okay, if Harry Douglas can put together an argument that tells me that he actually understands the roster of the Titans or understands the path to the Super Bowl, then I think I could go with it. But because he can't, I'm like, I struggle with that. Here's the realistic path to the Titans Super Bowl. The path is that the AFC East is a lot better this year. Mac Jones at New England, the Dolphins with another year in their rebuild, and there's at least a little bit of a competition for the Buffalo Bills playing a first-place schedule, and the Buffalo Bills lose a couple of games. You own up on your sucky division, and so you happen to win more games than the Bills because of their division versus your division, so you finish ahead of the Bills, so any playoff game would be in Nashville and not in Buffalo. That's one of the first steps. The second step is for Kansas City's age or Kansas City's lack of, true offensive line depth or something like that to rear its ugly head like it did in the Super Bowl. If you can do that, then maybe you've got a shot to finish right there around Kansas City and them not be a great team. Like if some of their defensive losses eventually catch up to them, or their age on defense or injuries on defense, guys like Frank Clark or Chris Jones or whatever, then maybe, okay, and then you get that fluky game like you had 2 years ago where they fumbled the ball, you return for a touchdown, they blew 2 kicks, and Tannehill leads you back, and Derrick Henry runs for 188 yards, you win a game. Okay. But you're going to need a bunch of things. You're not going to be able to make it to the playoffs as the 3rd or 4th seed, win a home game against Baltimore or Cleveland, go on the road to Buffalo, go on the road to Kansas City, and go to the Super Bowl. You're not going to be able to do that. So there has to be a road that makes sense. So you need Buffalo to regress. You need Cleveland to regress, playing harder schedule. You need the J.K. Dobbins injury at Baltimore to take them down a peg. You need Kansas City to kind of start to lose a little bit of the magic on the dynasty. You need a fluke game in there somewhere in the playoffs that you win because you're like, wow, how did they win that game? Well, they blocked a punt. Westbrook-Akina fielded it in the end zone for a touchdown. They ended up winning that game. Okay. But Harry doesn't explain any of that. He just says, they have a great roster. And?
There are a lot of good rosters in the NFL.
There are a lot of better rosters than the Titans.
Yeah.
So it's like, and even if Harry Douglas didn't do that, even if Harry Douglas said, look, the Titans went out and they added on defense by getting Bud Dupree. They've made a lot of depth moves, defensive line to Nico Autry. They're going to have Jeffrey Simmons is going to take that big step in year 3 because he was hurt in year 1. So this is the big offseason for Simmons. They've got so the defense will be okay. We know the offense is going to be all right. They've brought in Jim Schwartz. Taylor Lewan returns. Julio Jones. Then okay. But he didn't do any of that. So I hear a guy get on TV and say Titans are going to the Super Bowl, and I'm like, why? Like, why? How are the Titans going to get to the Super Bowl? And so that's when I look at this and I'm like, okay, Harry Douglas is just saying, talking, whatever. And that's when it starts to bother me a little bit.
And to your point of the Titans' possible road to the Super Bowl, that's a lot of conditions. That's a lot of things that need to go right for the Titans and things to go wrong for other teams in the AFC in order for the Titans to pave their way to the Super Bowl.
The road to the Super Bowl is always the most important thing that people never talk about. I think the case has been made. Belichick has never gotten to the Super Bowl as a wild card. So he has always had one of the byes. Every year the Patriots have been to the Super Bowl. And think about how many times they've been to the Super Bowl.
A lot.
They've been to the Super Bowl more than any other team. And they've always had a bye in order to do it. And I go back to the Chiefs' road to win the Super Bowl 2 years ago. We were doing the pregame show at the George Jones downtown. It was me, Chris, and Floyd. And it was week 17. And all the games that had making the playoff implications to them were moved to 3:30. And all the games that were about seeding or didn't matter were at noon. So one of the things that was really hard about doing a 3:30 Titans pregame show, and there'd be about 2 or 3 pregame shows per year that were like this. One of the hard things about doing a 3:30 or a Sunday night pregame with Floyd was we'd be at these, we'd be downtown at these locations that have all the games on TVs, and it'd be like, hey, pay attention. I just asked you a question about the defensive line against Washington's, and he's like sitting there like looking up at all the other games and just kind of, and like if anybody knows Floyd, he was glued on all those different TVs watching these games. And so there was that week 17. Titans are playing the Texans. Texans are already in. We didn't know if the Texans were going to play their players or not. They ultimately didn't. Titans ended up winning that game big. Derrick Henry won the rushing title. But the early games, Kansas City played the Chargers at home, and the Patriots played the Dolphins. And if the Patriots won, they were the 2 seed in the AFC, and Kansas City was 3. And I remember me, Chris, and Floyd cheering for the Dolphins because we knew the Titans with their defense had no chance against the Chiefs and Arrowhead, but that they could beat the Patriots who didn't have a great offense. So the Dolphins end up winning. Titans go to the Patriots, beat the Patriots, go to the Ravens, beat the Ravens, go to Arrowhead, lose to the Chiefs. So the Chiefs were looking. The road for the Chiefs that year, had the Dolphins not beaten the Patriots, would have been the Titans at home at Arrowhead, on the road at Foxborough against the Patriots off of a bye, on the road to Baltimore, 14-2 with the MVP Lamar Jackson. Instead, it was bye at home against the Texans, at home against the Titans. The road is so important. And that's why if you really want to talk about the Titans making the Super Bowl, you've got to give me the road. The road they went in 99 to get to the Super Bowl, win at home against Buffalo on a miracle, literally, at home against Buffalo on a miracle, go on the road to Peyton Manning, go on the road to 14-2 Jacksonville. That's not a road you want to play to get to the Super Bowl. That is the exception, not the rule. Big Ben did it in Pittsburgh. Eli did it twice with the Giants, where they go as the 6th seed to the Super Bowl. That's not going to happen, especially now with 7 seeds. So I do make the road a very big deal. To that point of, you need Buffalo to come down a little bit. You need Cleveland to come down a little bit. You need Baltimore. Like, you need to be above those teams in order to get to the Super Bowl. Now, I think the Titans are a pick'em right now with the Ravens, and a pick'em with the Browns, and a pick'em. That's it. They're pick'ems with them. They would be underdogs against the Bills, underdogs against the Chiefs. But you need to outplay what we think of you, and you need them to kind of underplay what we think of them, and then kind of swing the pendulum. Even think about the road the Buccaneers went last year. The Buccaneers got the Washington football team in the first round.
Yeah.
Give them a good team in the first round. Makes the road a lot harder. Your thoughts?
I mean, I think that it gives you a better outlook because anyone could say, I think this team is going to go to the Super Bowl. I think Kansas City is going to go to the Super Bowl because they have the best quarterback in the NFL. I think the Bucs are going to go to the Super Bowl because they have the best quarterback in the NFL. It's so easy to make those arguments because there are a lot of very talented teams, players, coaches, whatever it may be. But when you break it down and say, this is the way that the Titans can go to the Super Bowl, and you named all of those things, that the Browns need to play at a level below. The Ravens need to play at a level below what we think they're going to be. Something needs to go wrong in Kansas City, a team that seemed, like there weren't a lot of things that have gone wrong for Kansas City in the past few years. Buffalo Bills also, after a great season last year. When you look at all of those things, could all of those things happen? Sure. Is it likely? Probably not. So I hear Harry's point about the Titans having a great roster because they do. They have two
an okay roster.
If you look at top 2 or 2 top 10 wide receivers. Yeah, that's great. Best running back in the league, most likely. Yeah, that's great. But just like how you would have to look, you have to break down the Titans' schedule and see exactly how they could make their ride to the Super Bowl. You also have to break down their roster as well because they have holes. A lot of other teams in the league
you can make an argument
holes.
that Arizona on Sunday has a better roster than the Titans.
Yeah.
They've got 2 Hall of Fame wide receivers, DeAndre Hopkins, A.J. Green, J.J. Watt, Chandler Jones, Rodney Hudson, the center, who's an all-pro. I mean,
Buda Baker,
the safety.
Yeah.
I mean, you could legitimately argue that the Cardinals have a better roster than the Titans. I'm not arguing that. The
You could
Cardinals
make the
have
argument.
they have nothing at tight end. They have nothing in the secondary other than Buda Baker.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're not. I am not. I mean, look, I'm worried about every game. Like everybody should be worried about every game. I'm not worried about the Arizona Cardinals roster being better than the Titans. But you can make the argument.
Yeah.
People think Kyler's better than Tannehill. And so that's kind of my thing
And you
about
can make the argument that the Titans go to the Super Bowl this year. I just don't think it's a very strong one.
But you just have to have an argument.
Yeah.
And my point was I don't think Harry Douglas had one. I just think he was just saying things. Again, Max, if you could, play the clip and see if there's a legitimate argument about how the Titans can make the Super Bowl.
Damn it. The Tennessee Titans, I'm predicting, going to go to the Super Bowl this year. Now, if that good enough for y'all, now react out, yo.
I just got a question.
There we go. Clip that for Instagram.
So what happened to Patrick Mahomes?
No, he's still there.
Like, what happened to Tyrann Mathieu in that defense, too?
He's still there.
So how are they getting the Super Bowl? They're playing the same division.
He's there. I mean,
so explain.
Last time I checked, before last, the Titans beat the Kansas City Chiefs in the regular season. I remember them beating them.
Okay.
Okay.
But in the playoffs.
Okay.
Like, what happened?
They have an opportunity.
Expound on it. Talk
the
about
last
the
time
matchup.
I checked, the Tennessee Titans has a roster to make a Super Bowl run. If they put everything together, they have an opportunity to win a Super Bowl in Tennessee.
So do a lot of teams.
But, what's the argument? 2 years ago, they beat the Chiefs in a regular season game at Nissan Stadium. A game that the Titans got down 14-0, hit a bomb to Khalif Raymond. Derrick Henry took one, I think, 80-something yards. Derrick ran for 188 in that game. Tannehill threw for 182. Had a fourth-quarter comeback. The Chiefs fumbled the ball. The Titans returned for a touchdown, and the Chiefs blew 2 kicks at the end of the game. And that's his argument. And he didn't even know that.
And it could happen again.
It could. If you're going to make points, and I like Harry Douglas fine. He's a nice
Harry.
guy.
He's a great guy.
But do some research, please. Have better arguments. And I mean that as constructive criticism. But I just don't see, I hear that, and I'm like, what do you think about Harry Douglas saying the Titans are going to? I'm like, well, there's no argument there. It's just, all I know is they've got a roster good enough to go to the Super Bowl. Says you. But what makes the roster good enough? That's all I got. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. Ryan Tannehill added off of the COVID list. We'll have our thoughts on that. And I don't know how to feel about that. I'll explain why next. Hey, don't miss the pregame show live from Rock Bottom Brewery downtown this Sunday. The pregame show features yours truly, former Titans receiver Chris Sanders, and Mark Howard will join us for his debut. That's right, on this pregame show. Mark, of course, a pregame show legend, will join us from 9:30 to 11:30 Sunday morning live at Rock Bottom Brewery on Broadway before the Titans take on the Cardinals. The pregame show is brought to you by TriStar Moving, Parman Tractor and Equipment, FreedomTireGuys.com, FanDuel, E2 Roofing, Hillside Medical, Social Furniture, and Screwball Peanut Butter Whiskey.
Your team's a little healthier with Ryan coming back off of the reserve list on Saturday, but you still have Nate and Ben there. Are you hopeful that they can, considering where they were before they went on the reserve list, how hopeful are you of getting them back at some point this week and being able to help you Sunday?
Very hopeful. I would anticipate those guys having a few days of practice before they play in a football game.
There you go. That was Vrabel, and then the Titans waived Corey Levin a guard today, which makes me think that they're probably set with Nate Davis coming back. And the COVID fever is gone for the Titans, at least for right now.
On wood.
At least for right now.
Right now.
Harold Landry's back. Ryan Tannehill's back. Nick Zubnar's back. Somehow Racey McMath is back and not off the team. I don't know how that's – I don't understand it, but I'm not here to judge. And then you just heard right there, Ben Jones and Nate Davis. Vrabel expects to get off the COVID list and come back to play. Now, here's one question I have. When I had COVID, I was out for a week. A week of no exercise. And I can't remember if I exercised the second week. I don't think I did. Now, I wasn't vaccinated. Tannehill, Harold Landry, both vaccinated. Got COVID. But I didn't exercise for 2 weeks. Then I texted my buddy, who is the baseball strength coach at Louisville, and I asked him what the return to play was for people who have COVID to get back into performing. And he said it was basically a 10-day program of, 30 minutes light cardio, up it to 45, up it to an hour, drop it back down to 30 minutes, but raise the intensity, then 45, then an hour, and you see where I'm going with this. So that's what they did. And then that was how they could figure out whether or not somebody was in shape when they came back from COVID. Now, both guys are vaccinated, which is a big deal, because by being vaccinated, both guys' symptoms, we've been told, I don't know what it's like to have COVID when you have been vaccinated, but both guys, we've heard that the symptoms are a lot less for people who are vaccinated, and then they get the virus, and then it's like, oh, yeah, I just had a little bit of a headache, but then I tested positive, and they don't lose the taste and smell, and they're not knocked on their rear end for a week, and they're not. But each case is different. Are we worried about Tannehill making his return off of the COVID list, knowing that the game is 6 days away, and maybe feeling good about it, but there's a lack of practice, and are we for sure Tannehill's going to be in shape to play the game? Jones and Davis are big guys on the offensive line. Jones is significantly older than Davis. Do we feel comfortable that those guys are going to be ready to play a whole game in the heat of Nashville with a noon kickoff against Arizona on Sunday?
It does concern me because I think even more so the lack of practice, because I think being vaccinated, your symptoms are supposed to be not as intense if you're not vaccinated. It does make me concerned, and this has been my concern since the beginning, is that week or two of missed practice that Ryan Tannehill will not have with Julio Jones. So they're going into Arizona with a few days of practice under their belt together. But also, is there, I do not know of it, but it may exist, and I'm just not sure of it. Are there any sort of rules and regulations about working out when you are on the COVID list?
So all I know is you can't be around the team. So to your point, if Tannehill was vaccinated and had very few symptoms because
felt
of it,
fine.
He could have been riding the bike or running on the treadmill at his house every day. And when the COVID shutdowns happened, we talked about this on the air about football players that couldn't work out because they didn't know where to go.
Right.
And Floyd was like, my guess is a guy like Taylor Lewan probably has a gym in his house, and those dudes probably go over and work out at the gym in his house. And I'm guessing Tannehill probably has a gym in his house.
I'm sure.
And so to that point, I mean, even at that level, if you're Tannehill and you're not allowed around the team facilities and you got to isolate, don't you call a high school and say, hey, I'm going to be there if you are asymptomatic or you are not feeling the effects of COVID, and say, hey, I'm going to be at the high school at noon, from noon to 2, and then basically nobody's allowed in that weight room while I'm in there, and then we scrub it down, and here you go, and here's $800 for it. That would not surprise me.
Or he just Amazon Primes a treadmill and some weights or whatever he does to train.
Yeah, I feel like guys like that, though, don't want to wait and don't want to set up. So you're talking about more of
either way, whatever he was doing, I have to believe if he didn't have bad symptoms, which I don't know what his symptoms were, that he was doing something outside of practice. Because just because you have to isolate does not mean that you have to stop all physical activity.
I mean, he went on a hike with his family yesterday.
Yeah. So if he's feeling, and of course, going on a hike with your family versus playing in a professional football game, those are two very different levels of physical intensity. But I have to think if he had any concern about playing week 1 on Sunday, if he was a little bit nervous about, the longevity and having the endurance to finish the game, he wouldn't be out hiking.
Do you have any concern about any of the guys that have come off the COVID list?
Well, yeah. Yeah, I do. Because I like I said earlier, that concern is kind of underlying for any player that comes back from COVID, especially bigger guys, especially when it's early September and it is so hot outside.
We also don't know who's vaccinated and who's not.
Yeah, that's true.
And all I can know is off of what I've gone off of and what people have told me. I had COVID in January, and I think it was that UK strand or whatever. I don't know it for a fact. But I had it. And it would have taken me 3 weeks to play in a game. Maybe 4, honestly.
I didn't get back to, because I also had COVID, and I was not vaccinated. It was back in October, November.
So you got like the original COVID.
I have no idea. But it took me about a month to get back into working out at the same level that I was before.
And what I will call this is diet COVID. Like what before this Delta variant, apparently.
And granted, I'm not a professional athlete. I'm not in shape at the level that Ryan Tannehill or some of these guys are.
But I'm not sure that matters as much anymore. Like people, my buddy's a doctor, and he's saying that they got healthy 31-year-olds they're putting on ventilators right now. And that wasn't the case before. And that they're putting kids on ventilators right now.
Oh, God, that breaks my
heart. And so, this thing is different. That's why I'm saying, that's why I have a hard time, completely seeing this as a guarantee that if you're unvaccinated and you get this one, that it's 2 weeks and then you're back to football and you'll be fine. But maybe it is. I don't know. I don't know. Now, Jones and Davis, if they're going to come back, and I don't know the days they got put on, but I think it's 10 days and you have to test negative twice if you're not vaccinated. And I don't think it'll be 10 days for either guy, so that probably tells us that they are vaccinated, which, again, is good. We're a very pro-vaccine show. But I think the missed practice and the lack of practice time with Julio Jones is probably a bigger issue to me than whether or not Tannehill is going to be conditioned to play a whole game on Sunday against Arizona.
Ben Jones and Nate Davis?
I'm worried about that.
Yeah.
I'm worried about that. And maybe they'll
bigger guys.
Do some things and have the oxygen right there on the sidelines and put the oxygen right in. And maybe.
But then again, we don't know what their symptoms were because I was very short of breath, but I also was not vaccinated at the time. So I don't know.
Boy,
I don't know how. That's the thing is I don't know how it affects different people.
I was so short of breath when I had it, and this was January, February, that I did the show. I didn't do the show Monday or Tuesday. On Wednesday, I did 3 hours instead of 4, and I did 45 minutes at a time and then took a 15-minute break at the end of each hour. And I only did that show because the Vols hired Josh Heupel that day. Didn't work on Thursday. Went back to 4 hours on Friday. And then I think I did the whole next week totally fine. I was just up here stuck at the house.
Right.
But I was up here. And I was fine doing 4 hours, whatever. But yeah, that was something.
It's not fun.
A little breaking news. Apparently, UConn coach Randy Edsall. So UConn got embarrassed. Max, who did they play? They played some FCS school.
Fresno?
Holy Cross.
Holy Cross.
They played Fresno week 0 and got destroyed.
That's right.
They played Holy Cross this week and lost, right?
Yeah. So UConn's embarrassing. But it's not the coach's fault because they left the AAC to go to the Big East, and now they're a football independent.
And they opted out last year, so tough to recruit.
And they don't have much of a football tradition at Connecticut, and they don't have much of a recruiting base in the state of Connecticut. But Randy Edsall, who was the coach when they had success back in the days of the Big East, he came back in 2017. He announced yesterday that he was going to retire at the end of the season. Well, apparently he's out, and the defensive coordinator is taking over. Lou Spanos is the defensive coordinator. He's going to take over for Connecticut. And the only reason that matters is because Max thinks that's the game on the schedule Vanderbilt can win.
They're coming to Vanderbilt for a bye game for $0.
A bye game?
Like a body bagger?
The cost of getting ETSU for the Vandy game was reported over $400,000 for last week.
Dang. Imagine getting paid $400,000 and then walking out with a win.
Right. But on the other end of this, UConn is coming for what is on paper, on contract, as a bye game, and the open records request for the contract, the spot where the amount of money would be from UConn, it's $0. So that's where they're at for football. Is
Clark Lee allowed to lose this game? Like, I know that I said that the ETSU game I don't hold against Clark Lee, but if they play a UConn team that's just as bad as them that opted out last year, and it's not
now they don't have a head coach, really.
And the coach just quit.
Yeah.
Like, is that one where it's like, okay, Clark, you got to win that one, brother.
You got to remember, Jared, the last time I produced this show for a couple of days, you asked what will happen first, Texas and Oklahoma to the SEC or MLB to Nashville? And I said Texas and Oklahoma, and you were shocked. So occasionally I'm right.
I don't remember that, but I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, I do remember that. He's right. So,
I mean, hey, look, Texas and Oklahoma still got 5 years now.
That's true. But I don't think MLB is coming to Nashville in the next 5 years.
No, I don't either.
No.
And I don't know. I think I'm growing more skeptical that MLB is actually ever going to come to Nashville.
Why?
I just don't. I don't think there's anybody in town that. I'm not sure there's anybody in the.
There's a whole group that's campaigning for it.
Oh yeah, but that's that. Hey, look.
What is it? The Nashville Stars.
I got a better chance of bringing a baseball team to town than those guys. You know how much money you got to have to bring a baseball team for an expansion team?
Billions.
At least $3 billion. You know how much money they have?
$150.
$2 million.
Well, that's something. It's a start.
They have a backup middle infielder.
Well, that's a start.
No, it's not.
Then what is it?
What is it?
Yeah.
It's nothing.
Okay.
In the grand scheme of it, because that's what that group is. It's nothing. I mean, I'm not going to say it's a Ponzi scheme, but I'm also not going to not say it's a Ponzi scheme.
That's fair.
And so that group's got no shot. That's a joke. Like that whole thing, anybody who ever reads those the Tennesseans should be ashamed of themselves when they post an article that's like, Luke Combs joins the MLB to Nashville effort because it's not feasible.
But then don't say that there's nobody in this city that wants it, that it thinks there's going to be a.
But there's nobody there. It's like Vanderbilt. There's nobody there that I see and think, okay, that person can do it. Yeah. And I don't think there's anybody in this town, and I'm really talking about Murfreesboro because that's where I think you have to have it, or like Smyrna, like Rutherford County. I don't think there's anybody there that wants it enough because it's going to cost now.
It's going to be expensive.
The Cobb County, when they lured the Braves, they took all this tax money and they took all this, like, I think it was for like schools and parks and stuff, and they basically gave it all to the Braves to get them to come. And every single person in the state or in the city, like council, all voted out immediately. And I just don't think people are willing to do that. So,
well, because
I'm more bullish than I'm more bearish than I was before.
It's not just buying the rights to an expansion team. You also have to build a stadium.
Now you got to get the Rays.
And you have to get people out there.
You have to get the Rays. And then you have to cut the Sounds in on the deal, supposedly. And I don't know. Kevin Carter, former Tennessee Titan Pro Bowler, CBS college football analyst, will join us next. What did KC make of week one? Wanted to come on, talk some ball, and Casey also told me he wants to pay his respects to the GM, so we're going to let him do that. Kevin Carter joins us next. Stillman and Company, it's ESPN 102.5 The Game. First, Caroline's got to tell us about BetUS.
BetUS, it is my favorite sports book. Football is back. Finally, week one made a little bit of money from BetUS, so you should get in on the action too. BetUS has been America's favorite sportsbook for over 25 years, and that is exactly why I endorse BetUS, because they've been around. They've been around the block. People have made money from BetUS, and you need to know that you're going to get paid, and that's exactly what you get from BetUS. They offer everything, including live betting, MMA, golf, horses, esports, all kinds of crazy bets. So if you didn't make money from the college football week one, you can make it up there. 1-800-79-BET-US. Call today, and they will walk you through setting up an account. That is 1-800-79-BET-US. It's super easy to set up an account. I've done it. I recommend that you do it too. Nobody in the industry gives bigger bonuses than BET-US. Join now. Mention GAME, G-A-M-E, and you can get up to 200% in bonuses on your first deposit. Nobody beats that. That is the best in the industry. I bet at BET-US. So should you. So go now to BETUS.com. Join today. Put in promo code GAME, G-A-M-E, for up to 200% in bonuses on your first deposit. That is BETUS.com.
From the Game Nashville studios, it's Stillman and Company. Delivered by TriStar Moving. TriStar Movers with 5-star service. With Jared Stillman on Nashville's best sports talk.
ESPN.
1025 The Game and the Game Nashville app.
Stillman and Company is delivered by TriStar Moving, ESPN 1025 The Game. Titans Week 1, college football Week 1 in the books. Former Titan great Kevin Carter set to join us in just a little bit. We're efforting KC along. KC asked me the other day, said, when am I going to come on, talk some ball? And when are we going to talk about the GM? Because Kevin Carter obviously has been a humongous, I would say just of all the things that you think about in life, you had a guy in St. Louis who the Rams had kind of put out there, Kevin Carter's kind of lazy, Kevin Carter's kind of this, Kevin Carter's kind of that. And Floyd didn't believe it because they had studied Kevin really, really hard when they were drafting Steve McNair. Kevin Carter was in the first round of the same draft. And they'd gotten to know Kevin Carter, and they thought, he's not a bad guy. So they traded a first-round pick for him. And when they traded the first-round pick for Kevin Carter, he came in here and was a Pro Bowler and a great player and ended up becoming one of the most philanthropic Titans over the last couple of years, over the last 2 decades, and still to this day hosts charity events in Nashville. We've done the show from his golf tournament. We've talked about waiting for wishes with Kevin Carter. And they've made just so much money over the years. And this was a guy that had a reputation. Oh, he's a bad guy. And here he is 20 years later still giving something back. And so I knew how proud Floyd was of Kevin Carter. And, not just the success that he's had now as a broadcaster. I believe his son plays at Dartmouth, which I think, Floyd was obviously very proud of. But just really, really loved Kevin Carter. And so we are efforting him along. Meanwhile, though, we did have week 1 of college football. So let's get to some of your texts on it. 615-737-1025. Because I have kind of ignored the text line today, which I shouldn't do. So let's get right to that. Caroline Fenton, our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com.
David texts in and says, Jared, I know you refuse to even acknowledge any Group of 5 schools, but you have got to give some props to Tulane. You probably didn't watch the game, but it was not fluky. That game played in NOLA, and Tulane very well may have won.
Tulane played who?
Oklahoma.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I watched a little bit of that game.
Mm-hmm. What?
Shrug.
Oklahoma beat Tulane by 5 points. You have to give them some credit there.
Give Tulane credit?
Yeah.
Am I supposed to give Tulane credit?
For almost beating Oklahoma?
But, is that something that matters to any of us?
I mean, it's a game that happened, and I think it was a shock. If I was going to put money on it, I would say Oklahoma 75-0.
So, we need to dedicate time out of our radio show to give Tulane credit for not losing? For not winning, but not losing by a lot?
Well, what was one school that neither of us put in our top 4, but is always a name that's thrown around for the college football playoff?
Oh, sure. Oklahoma. Yeah.
Yeah. And so them almost losing to Tulane, I think is very worthy of talking about.
I go back to Texas A&M last year. They barely beat Vanderbilt, an 0-9 Vanderbilt team with Ken Seals at quarterback. They barely beat them. Barely beat Vanderbilt. Got just annihilated by Alabama and ended up the 5th best team in the country. Oklahoma is not in any danger because they almost lost to Tulane. I'm not saying that it's good, but it's not going to hurt them. The committee's not going to sit in the room and say, well, they almost lost to Tulane, so let's put them out. I still think Oklahoma makes the college football playoff. Well, I said that I thought Iowa State was going to beat them. But I still think that Oklahoma's got a legitimate shot to make the college football playoff, regardless of whether or not they almost beat Tulane or didn't, whatever on Saturday.
So you're not putting too much real estate into week 1, but you are ready to say that Clemson's quarterback is not going to finish the season.
I didn't say finish the season. I said eventually they'll go get somebody else.
You said that somebody else would be in there mid-season.
No, I said that this will be like Kelly Bryant. Kelly Bryant made the playoff. They got beat. Kelly Bryant came back the next year, and then they got somebody better, and that guy went in.
Another texter texts in and says money has nothing to do with Vanderbilt right now. Vanderbilt needs to spend more money on a legitimate coach. Case in point, James Franklin. Players wanted to come to Vandy and play for him. Come on, would you want to go to Vandy and play for Derek Mason or Clark Lee? I don't think so. James Franklin had a winning program at Vanderbilt. They don't have the facility, but players are smart and parents are smart. Coaches in college make all the difference.
I don't understand how people can look at Clark Lee and say that he's not qualified for that job.
Was he OC or DC at
He was the DC. James Franklin was the second choice. He was the offensive coordinator at Maryland, and I had never heard of the guy when they hired him as the Vanderbilt head coach. Clark Lee was the defensive coordinator in the college football playoff last year at Notre Dame. Clark Lee is an alum at Vanderbilt. Money is not the idea of they need to go pay a coach. 4 years ago, I can't remember how many years ago this was, Jordan Rodgers said to me on the show, he goes, it's not about the coach. It's not about the whatever. It's not about the AD. It's not about, he was like, it's about the university and the money that Vanderbilt doesn't spend. And it's not about the coach. It's not about, and this was when I was like, Derek Mason needs to start winning some more games kind of vibe.
Mm-hmm.
And he just told me, it's not about those things. And so Derek Mason can't win any games last year. They give him for years, they released renderings about, we're going to upgrade our facility, and they'd said everything under the sun, and they never did it. Derek Mason came on this show and was like, we need to update the stadium. And they never did it. Until a shovel goes into the ground, I don't care about the Vandy United plan. And you shouldn't either if you're a Vanderbilt fan. But I don't blame Derek for going 0-9 last year, and I don't blame Clark Lee for losing to ETSU this weekend.
Well, I don't think that facilities were the reason why Vanderbilt went 0-9 last year.
I don't think it helped.
It didn't help, no.
How can you get people to...
They didn't have an offensive line.
You've never been to that stadium.
No.
Like, you've never been
to a game, no.
So I don't think, like, I'm not going to sit here and say I don't think you're qualified enough to understand how bad that stadium is, but you haven't been there. It is legitimately
Vanderbilt
a death
went 0-9
trap.
last year because they didn't have any players.
How do you get players?
Well, they opted out of for COVID.
Right, but if you had players that wanted to be there because they were trying to make it to the NFL, like the Alabama players, the Ohio State players, or the Clemson players, or you had the facilities, they might do it.
And those are also winning programs. And I know it's like a chicken and egg situation.
No, it is not a chicken and egg situation. If you do not, here's how it works in college football. If you have a great program, you have to have the best facilities. Because if you don't have the best facilities, somebody else is going to build something better, and then they're going to jump you as a better program. Look at what Oregon's done to the Pac-12. Oregon spent a bunch of money, got better facilities, better uniform at conference overnight with Chip Kelly. So if you're a top program, if you're Alabama, if you're LSU, if you're Clemson, Ohio State, you have to have the best facilities. Because if you don't have the best facilities, then somebody else will have better ones and say, come here instead of there. And, for a little bit, somebody might have a bowling alley in their facility and they've got a barber shop in their facility and they've got, but ultimately they all have great facilities.
Yeah.
Then there's Vanderbilt. Like, you can't do this with bad facilities. And there's Vanderbilt. Like, that's the problem. There's no way you can recruit to that. There is no way. And Vanderbilt prides themselves on running a clean program so much so that even the hint of cheating will get you fired there. Everybody else is cheating left and right. Like, it is not easy to win there. And that stadium is a pit. I mean, honestly, it is the most valuable real estate in the city that has almost no practical or livable use. Because that stadium is so bad. I cannot highlight how bad that stadium is enough. That stadium is a 1960 stadium in 2020. What's next?
Another texter texts in and says, you can recruit all you want in college football, but it comes down to what you have to offer as far as facilities, to your point, and winning. Vandy has none of that, but if they got a name coach as James Franklin proved, players will come.
I have such a hard time with this. Nobody knew who James Franklin was. They found out who James Franklin was because he won games at Vanderbilt, but nobody knew who he was. Like, when Toledo hired Nick Saban to be the head coach, nobody knew who Nick Saban was. I asked Floyd one time, I said, when you were coaching with Saban in Houston, and they are buds. I mean, they were just buddies. Like, I'll put it to you like this. We were hanging out one time, the three of us, and Floyd said to Saban, hey, look, anytime you come in town, you're going to visit the dealership or whatever, just let me know. And you and Terry come over to the house, me and Sal, love to see you, that kind of thing. They're that kind of buds. Mm-hmm. And I asked Floyd, I said, did you know when you worked with Nick Saban that he was going to be this good? And he looked at me, and I told Saban this a couple of weeks ago. He looked at me and said, did I think the man was a good coach? Yeah. Did I think he'd be the greatest coach in the history of the NC2A? No. And that's like, so you don't know who the best coach is. You know who's a good coach. Like, you know who's a good radio host. You know who's bad. Like, that is, and so they found James Franklin. The same people that hired Derek Mason hired James Franklin. Nick Zeppos and David Williams. I hired them both. One was good, one was not. No disrespect to Derek. I thought Derek did what I would think the average coach would do at Vanderbilt. But there's this idea of like, when Vanderbilt hit it out of the park by hiring James Franklin, he was the second choice. Gus Malzahn accepted the job, then turned it down. He was the first choice. What's next?
Another texter texts in, we were talking about Georgia and Clemson, kind of, are we overreacting to Clemson, or to Georgia's win against Clemson? Brian texts in and says, as a Georgia fan, I'm very proud for a top 5 win on the big stage against the second best program of the last 7 years. But I would be lying if I if I think we would have more explosive plays on offense. Georgia's missing their top 4 receivers and tight end, but Kirby still has some, dude.
Yeah, I just think that they're trying to do it the older Alabama way and not the newer Alabama way.
Mm-hmm.
Like the newer Alabama way is let's throw the ball all over the yard. But that wasn't like John Parker Wilson, Greg McElroy, A.J. McCarron. That wasn't how those guys played. Now, they had great receivers like Amari Cooper and Julio Jones, but it wasn't really until Lane Kiffin got there and Derrick Henry left. Let's throw it all over the yard. And even that first year with Jalen Hurts, I think they were kind of skeptical about doing it that way. And then they felt like the game was just transforming. So it's like, okay, we've got to do it. And then all of a sudden it became what you saw with Jalen and then Tua because Jalen couldn't get it done. Then last year Mac Jones was throwing it around the yard. And now this guy, Bryce Young, is going to throw it around the yard every play. Kirby has not gotten there yet. Kirby's had the running backs. Kirby had Nick Chubb. Kirby had Sony Michel. Kirby had, who was the kid that they've had in the past, the last couple of years?
Nick Chubb?
No, after Chubb, just went to the NFL.
Oh, DeAndre Swift.
Yeah, he had DeAndre Swift. He's got Zamir Wright. Kirby's had the running backs. He's had the big, voluptuous offensive line that you have to have that you see Alabama trot out there on the field every week. I mean, Kirby trots those fat boys out there just like he's at Alabama. They've had the wide receivers. They just haven't had the quarterbacks. And ultimately do it the old Alabama way with the game manager as a quarterback. Mm-hmm. And eventually he's going to need the shot taker at quarterback. And I don't know if when Daniel gets Pickens back and these other guys, I was not impressed with JT Daniels on Saturday.
I think, would you have been